Chapter 202. Ugh. Seems like yesterday's and the day before yesterday's chapter names were mixed up. Depressing. Let's just watch. Epsilon equals Omega asterisk psi. Iron wings across the sky, dark clouds covering the sun. This was the scene that Genevieve saw when she walked out of the underground shelter with her face covered in dust and dirt and faced the palace that had lost its former glory. Your Royal Highness, His Majesty has ordered the Air Force and Xia Inga's St. Michael Knight Regiment to be dispatched. At this time, the attendants beside her also received a message from a nearby Air Force base. The Air Force is dispatched, and Xia Inga? Genevieve was taken aback. She was surprised to find that on the messy ground in front of her, the gallows that should have collapsed in the shocking incident just now was still standing there. On it, a cut noose was fluttering slowly in the wind. So the commotion just now was man-made. Genevieve's voice became incomparably cold. Now, she only had one feeling, and that was she was played. Whether it was the Britannia Empire or the rescue team that rescued Cornelia, both sides just treated her like a clown. Yes, according to the news from the Air Force Base, within a few minutes after the incident, they received an order from their country to immediately dispatch the bomber group and Xia Inga's St. Michael Knight Regiment. Is that so? Then let's go. Genevieve glanced fiercely at the gallows, then turned and left angrily. About 100 kilometers southwest of the Catherine Palace, a tall and mighty steel lion was running quickly along the vast and boundless plains beneath its feet. He actually ran here in such a short time. Cornelia, who still hadn't figured out the sequence of events, couldn't care less about why Lei Mingkai would appear in Catherine's palace and rescue her. Now, she could only sit in the back seat in a daze, looking at the familiar terrain around her. According to her memory, the terrain around here should be southwest of Catherine Palace. Yes, we are now almost 100 kilometers away from the Catherine Palace. However, this distance is far from enough for us to lower our guard. The Empire will inevitably send troops to intercept us. Your Royal Highness Cornelia, please be prepared for a hard battle. Rei Mingkai, who was sitting in the front, nodded slightly and casually explained the current situation. In fact, even if Rei Mingkai didn't say it, as the Valkyrie, Cornelia would naturally think of the upcoming battle. Cornelia withdrew her gaze from the screen and turned to the driver's seat in front of her and sighed slightly. Rei Mingkai, I can't sigh about the current situation. So, I could do what I could do and let you take me to CUFFI. That's enough. Thank you for your understanding. Rei Mingkai secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If Cornelia showed an expression of subject who had no choice but to die, Rei Mingkai would have a headache for a while. Fortunately, Cornelia's performance was calm throughout the journey. This also made Rei Mingkai more relaxed. Mingkai, the enemy is here. At this time, State Zero's voice sounded in the cockpit. Where? Rei Mingkai's hands tightened, and he was already holding the joystick. Above us, 8,000 meters in the air, a group of annoying flies. State Zero's voice was a little irritated. It knew that in the current situation, the long-toothed lion could not threaten the enemies who were rapidly approaching in the air. 8,000 meters? It's a bomber group. We must leave this area immediately. Cornelia was shocked and quickly shouted, Well, move now. State Zero, change the route. Rei Mingkai's hands moved, and the long-toothed lion that was galloping on the plains immediately turned and ran towards the hill on the left. Although it was not high, it was still about 100 meters high. Facing the bomber group that covered the sky, staying on the plains was undoubtedly looking for death. Hill, be careful of an ambush. Cornelia thought for a while and thought of a possibility. No, don't be careful. The enemy has found us. Unexpectedly, Rei Mingkai narrowed his eyes slightly and raised his hand to show the situation on the hill in front to Cornelia. That's the St. Michael Knight Regiment. They actually sent them to intercept us. Lei no Kai, be careful of the golden mech standing in front. That's Shin Hyuga Xia Inga's special plane. When Cornelia saw the Sunderland that blocked the entrance to the hill, She immediately recognized them from the paint and logo on their bodies. Moreover, the appearance of the nightmare that was different from the other Sunderland and was covered in golden paint made Cornelia feel a sense of pressure. Golden Warhorse, Visigatorix? Ray Minkai softly called out the name of the golden nightmare and secretly said, I didn't expect to meet him. Originally, this guy should have gone to find Archimedes for a blind date. Kai, be careful. Although this lion is very powerful, if we are entangled by them, the bomber group will arrive. Cornelia was not worried about the power of the long-toothed lion. She was only worried about the incoming bomber group. Well, the long-toothed lion roared and rushed towards the St. Michael Knight Regiment without fear. Xiainga, the lion is rushing over. The staff officer of the St. Michael Knight Regiment, the female knight Shang Lo, saw that the long-toothed lion did not stop because of their appearance, but instead accelerated and quickly reminded her. Well, don't panic. This is the first time I've seen it. Although I've heard of your existence before, I didn't expect to see you here. In this case, you can make up for the regret of not seeing Hannibal's undead with your own eyes. Asherai Ashura. Take your teammates to test the strength of this beast. In the cockpit of the Golden Warhorse, the man with a calm expression, Shintagatanga smiled and gave the order to his most belligerent subordinate, Asherai Ashura, to attack. Yes, Xiainga, little ones, follow me. Under the leadership of the Red Gloucester, driven by the man with long orange hair and a braid, the Gloucester the Azura team immediately moved and launched a quick attack in a scattered formation, quickly outflanking the long-toothed lion. Xiainga, with the strength of the Azura team alone, is it possible to subdue this steel beast? Although Shang Lo was very familiar with the strength of Azura, she knew nothing about the existence of a long-toothed lion. Today, for the first time, she learned about the existence of a long-toothed lion from Shin Hyuga Xiainga. Probably. However, our goal is not to subdue this steel beast, but to restrict its movements. The rest of the things will be left to the Air Force to deal with. Although Shin Hyuga Xiainga's eyes flashed with a hint of interest, he still chose to wait and see. Guy, they're attacking. Cornelia glanced at the St. Michael Knight Regiment that only sent a Gloucester team to intercept the long-toothed lion and couldn't help but remind him. Roger. Your Highness, sit tight. It may be a little uncomfortable. Ray Minkai responded, and then pushed with both hands. The two plasma thrusters on the back of the long-toothed lion suddenly burst into two more blazing plasma flames. Puff! There was a light sound as if something was pierced, and the moment of the explosion. A looming circle formed by mist spread from the head of the long-toothed lion to the back of the long-toothed lion. The speed of the long-toothed lion suddenly increased to a new height, like a gust of wind, and rushed straight towards the Azura team that was rushing towards it. What? It actually rushed over like this. It's really just a beast. As the main attacker, Azura saw that the long-toothed lion had suddenly accelerated and was rushing towards him. He couldn't help but shout out in excitement. The next moment, with a long sword in hand, the Red Gloucester, driven by Azura, was fearless, like a human warrior in a prehistoric civilization. He waved the weapon in his hand and launched an attack on the king of the wild beasts that ruled the wilderness. Come on, come on, come on, let me see your strength. The blade in the Red Gloucester's hand flashed, and he fearlessly slashed towards the long-toothed lion. Bang! Boom! A crisp sound of the blade breaking, a roar of the Red Gloucester being smashed into pieces, and the formation of the Azura team that was trying to outflank the long-toothed lion showed a trace of stagnation. Immediately afterward, before the members of the Azura team could react, the long-toothed lion that almost turned into a gust of wind had broken through the encirclement of the Azura team and rushed towards the position of the Golden Warhorse, vising Torix, like an arrow released from a bow. Azura was defeated in an instant. Shang La looked at the long-toothed lion that set off a gust of wind on the ground in disbelief. Shang La, we're going to do it for real. This steel beast is very strong. All members of the St. Michael Knight Regiment, listen to my command. Fire with all your might. After Shin Hyuga Shingle gave the order with a dignified expression, a trace of ferocity appeared on his face. Very strong, but it is because of his strength that it has the value of death. He raised his right thumb and suddenly pressed the button on the joystick, and the golden warhorse, Visinger Torix, suddenly changed from human form to a centaur form, and raised its front hooves. It rushed out dozens of meters away, and took the lead to attack the long-toothed lion. Everyone, follow, shingle, and crusade against this steel beast. The female knight Shang Law made a delicate shout and drove her Sunderland closely behind the golden warhorse, Visinger Torix. Chapter 203. In front of the hill, gunshots were heard. Under the lead of the golden warhorse Vercingetorix, the other Sunderland warriors, including the female knight Shang Ro, spread out in an arc formation to the left and right, and outflanked the Longfong lion. At first glance, it seemed that there was no difference with the method used by Ashuri and Ashura just now. But in fact, Shang Ro's subordinates were constantly using their own machine guns and howitzers to cover the golden warhorse Vercingetorix's advance. Although the bullets fired by the machine guns in Sunderland's hands could not penetrate the armor of the Longfong Line Zero, they could only create a burst of meaningless sparks on the armor of the Longfong Line Zero. Is this beast a monster? Even the machine guns of Sunderland can't penetrate its body. Shang Ro looked at the Longfong Line Zero that ignored the barrage created by the Sunderland in shock. Fortunately, in Sunderland, those Sunderland equipped with howitzers could still play a little role. That was to continuously bombard the Longfong Line Zero's path with frequent and intensive howitzers, trying to interfere with the Longfong Line Zero's advance. However, the howitzers that seemed to be effective did not have much impact on the Longfong Line Zero's advance. At most, it made the Longfong Line Zero change its path slightly and roar a few times. Roar! Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the explosion and the roar was like a knife at this moment, cutting the courage of Shang Ro and the other St. Michael Knights members back and forth. Woo, boom. With a sharp whistle, a grenade flew across the sky and accidentally hit the head of a long-fanged lion, giving it a solid blow. Success? Shang Ro widened his eyes and stared at the smoke that shrouded the Longfong Lion Zero. However, huge lion head that was still white and flawless even after being hit directly rushed out of the smoke, and its sharp fangs flashed as it let out an angry roar. Not good. Get out of my way. Roar. As soon as Shang Luo's voice fell, the long-toothed Lion Zero form's figure flashed and disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Sunderland, who was lucky enough to hit the tusked lion with his howitzer. A cold light flashed. Bang! Sunderland wasn't crushed by the claws of the Longfong lion. Instead, it was the golden warhorse Vercingetorix that was struck by the Longfong lion. However, Vercingetorix, who had saved his subordinates from the lion's claws, didn't seem to be having a good time. Beep, beep, beep. The screen in front of Shin Hyugasherina was red. The flashing red screen almost made him think that his geas had spread to the screen. In his astonishment, he also realized the current situation. That's right. Even if the golden warhorse, Vercingetorix, blocked the Fong Lion's claw with its own exclusive weapon, the golden battle axe, it did not mean that the golden warhorse had the strength to fight against the Fong Lion's claw. However, the claw attack had already caused Vercingetorix's system to enter the red alert state. As time went by, Vercingetorix's red alert state would probably intensify until he was flattened to the ground by the Longfong lion. Xia Yingiking, retreat. After Shin Hyugasherina ordered his subordinates to retreat, he struggled to let the golden warhorse burst out with its last strength to push the Longfong lion's claws away, and took this opportunity to quickly retreat. Xia Yingiking, are you okay? As soon as he saw Vercingetorix escape from the Longfong lion's claws, Shang Luo immediately led his subordinates to provide cover for him, even though this cover was dispensable. Fortunately, the Longfong lion didn't put them in his eyes, and once again rushed towards the hill at a speed that left the golden warhorse Visingetorix and Nightmare in the dust. Chase. No, don't chase. We are not the opponent of this monster. Shinhuga Sherina stopped Shang Luo and his subordinates from chasing. As a cruel smile gradually appeared on his mouth, he slowly said, "Our mission has been completed. The next thing will be left to the Air Force and those artillery soldiers hiding in the back." Shang Luo froze for a moment, then remembered the previous mission arrangement, and then breathed a sigh of relief and looked back at the position of Azura's team. Fortunately, the other side didn't kill us. No, it's not that they didn't kill us. It's just that Azura's luck is good. Shinhuga glanced at Azura, who was struggling to escape from the almost flattened cockpit with the help of his subordinates. As Azura was dragged out of the cockpit by his subordinates, a stream of bright red flowed out of the cockpit, slowly forming a pool of dazzling red on the ground. Azura's martial arts luck ends here. Without his legs, he can no longer continue to drive the Nightmare and fight for the Empire. Shang Luo moved his lips, but did not say anything. She knew that in the face of the terrifying steel behemoth, if the entire St. Michael Knight Regiment only paid the price of a captain's disability to complete the mission, it was too cost-effective. Although, this was the other side's intention to rush into the hill and hide their whereabouts when the bomber group arrived. "Time's up. Shang, tell our people to stay away from here. Let's see if this is a battle between a trapped beast or a good show of a beast coming out of the cage." Shinhuga Sherina opened the cockpit and looked up at the bomber group flying quickly from the rear. At this moment, the iron wings covered the sky and the sun. Boom, boom, boom. Almost at the same time, there were bursts of thunder in the sky. In midair, there was a burst of shrill whistling sounds. This was the railway railgun firing. Come on, let me see if it's a battle between a trapped beast and a beast coming out of the cage. Shinhuga's eyes widened, staring at the hill that had been submerged by countless streams of light. Boom, boom, boom. The continuous explosions broke through the void and fell on the hills like a torrential rain. Countless gravel and soil were lifted into the air in this dense and violent bombardment, rolling across the air and falling on the body of the Tusk Lion Zero, which still maintained a high-speed state. "Kai, we must pass through this hill immediately. I'm afraid your plan can no longer continue." They used the railway railgun. Cornelia, who was familiar with the Empire's equipment, immediately guessed what the other party used when she saw the bombardment of this scale. Railgun? It seems that not only the front line is equipped with railguns. I can't believe there are so many railguns in this area at the rear. Ray Minkai calmly cooperated with the movements of the Tusk Lion Zero, constantly letting it avoid the bombardment from the sky and the boulders mixed in the soil. "Kai, those annoying guys are here. Can I use that move?" State Zero's voice became very impatient. Obviously, after being bombarded in the face, those flies at an altitude of 8,000 meters would throw bombs on their heads. No matter who encountered such an encounter, they would be annoyed. "Wait, State Zero, hold on a little longer. And, are you sure you have enough energy?" Ray Minkai reached out and pressed a few buttons on the small keyboard next to him, estimating the flight route of the bomber group that had already flown to the top of his head, and said casually, "Energy? Don't worry. Now I'm full. As long as the number of cherry stones can keep up, there won't be a big problem." With a flash of light, the image of the White Cat Zero appeared in the cockpit. Of course, this was not the White Cat Zero's body, but a holographic projection. "Okay, hold on for another 10 minutes. "Understood." The communication between Ray Minkai and State Zero made Cornelia a little confused. "Wait, Kai, you want to fight back?" "Yes. If we don't get rid of some of those flies, even if we can rely on these hills to avoid this disaster, we won't be able to find the same natural cover as now in the subsequent journey." Ray Minkai's gaze kept moving on the screen, and his mind kept repeating the parameters on the screen. But what do you have to do to shoot down those bomber groups? These are bomber groups at an altitude of 8,000 meters. Cornelia simply couldn't imagine that a beast that only looked like a land battle equipment No, a complete land battle beast from head to toe would have the means to threaten a target at 8,000 meters in the air. Let's do it first. Ray Minkai didn't explain and just replied faintly. Roar. While dodging the bombardment from the railgun, the Long Fong Line Zero also growled, echoing Ray Minkai's words. Are you all crazy? Cornelia couldn't imagine the battle that would happen next. Woo! Suddenly, there was a burst of strange whistling in the sky. This burst of whistling even completely covered the whistling sound from the railgun shells, and in the blink of an eye, it occupied the sky, wantonly reverberating back and forth between the hills. Aerial bomb. Kai. The bombing is coming. Roger. State Zero. Roar. With a roar, a ray of light appeared at the front of the Long Fong Line Zero. This ray of light, in the blink of an eye, wrapped the Long Fong Line Zero from the beginning to the end. Then, in the roar of the explosion, it turned into a little starlight and disappeared in the dust in the sky. Under the starlight, it had changed into a blue suit of armor, carrying two more powerful plasma engines on its back. It was the European lion with long fangs. The European lion with long fangs. Go! Hunter's Long Fong Lion. Lei Minkai pushed with both hands, and the long-fanged lion, which had changed into a blue armor, instantly turned into a blue stream of light, as if it was taking a leisurely stroll through the purgatory created by artillery shells and aerial bombs. Chapter 204. Altitude 5,000 meters. Target confirmed. Prepare to drop the bombs. In the communication channel of the bomber group, flying in the sky, similar commands constantly sounded, but less than a minute after this command sounded, a new command sounded. Pause the dropping of bombs. Pause the dropping of bombs. Target lost. Target lost. Many of the bombardiers were stunned for a moment, but they still released the buttons in their hands and paused their actions. However, in this strange pause, there were still a few bombs that were not willing to stop. A few of the bombardiers who reacted a beat slower released the bombs from the open magazine ports, ending this wave of bombardment. Of course, this mistake was not investigated, because the officers were all staring blankly at the lion, which still maintained a high-speed maneuver state under the high-speed camera. This? Who can tell me, what is this thing? It was just being drowned by the bombs dropped by our bomber group just now. How come it's running in front of the bombs now? Looking at the lion that had turned from white to blue and rushed in front of the aerial bombs in one breath, allowing the fierce bombing to follow behind it, and not letting the bombing from the bomber group explode on its surroundings or on its body again. Everyone subconsciously took in a cold breath. Originally, they just thought that this was an order made by His Majesty for fun, but they didn't expect that this lion, which should be destroyed under the fierce bombing of the bomber group, actually had such an amazing ability. Report. St. Michael Knight Regiment Commander Xia Inga sent an inquiry. Do you need their support? In the midst of the shock, a message from a bystander came. Xia Inga? Is the new commander of the Knight Regiment so kind-hearted? Reply. Let our bomber group and the train rail cannon group in the distance deal with this. If St. Michael Knight Regiment rashly enters the bombing area, the shells will not have eyes. Yes, sir. Take the next step. Inform the train rail cannon group to cease fire. Let our bomber group deal with the following matters. Yes, sir. The sky covered by the iron wings rumbled, and the bombs that had been silent for a period of time once again fell from the bomb bay under the bomber group's belly. Like a rainstorm, they fell towards the hill below, smashing towards the blue figure that was still running quickly in the hills. Kai! The group of flies is starting again. In the holographic projection, the White Cat State Zero once again looked up at the sky that was raining bombs, and its face became more and more ferocious. I know, but now is not the time. Ray Minkai knew how irritated State Zero was, but he still maintained the altitude of the bomber group at a height that State Zero could not reach. As long as the altitude of the bomber group decreased even a little, the trump card that Lei Minkai and State Zero had prepared for the current situation would be revealed. Woo 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 woo, when the aerial bombs streaked across the sky, The screams they set off echoed in the hills. They even reverberated back and forth along the canyons between the hills, spreading into the distance and reaching the crowd standing on the cliff on the other side of the hills. It can actually hold on for so long? What is the origin of that lion? Shang-La put down the binoculars in his hand and said in amazement, I don't know, but what can be confirmed now is that our new emperor seems to be very afraid of this lion. Shin Hugexiainga walked out of the cockpit, took the binoculars from Shang-La, and looked at the hills that were being bombarded back and forth by the bomber group. According to the scale of the bombing, even if there are strong air defense facilities in the hills, I'm afraid it would have been destroyed long ago. It seems that this lion does indeed have the ability to make our emperor afraid. Xiainga, I just followed your instructions to test the Air Force. In the end, as you expected, we are just bystanders in this operation. If we don't count the encounter just now, and as sure as Zhura's injury. Shang-La looked back at the medical vehicle that had already carried out the field surgery and said, Yes, that's it. Search for as much information about that lion as possible. In the coming days, our St. Michael Knight Regiment, and even St. Raphael, St. Gabriel, and even St. Uriel Knight Regiment will probably have to fight with this lion. Shin Hugexiainga put down the binoculars and smiled slightly. Speaking of which, compared to the other two Knight Regiments, I am more willing to cooperate with St. Raphael Knight Regiment. Shang-La lowered his head slightly and did not intend to take over the topic from Shin. After all, no matter how outstanding she was only Shin Hugexiainga's staff officer. She had no right to speak about the matters between the four Guardian Knight Regiments. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, a new round of bombing began. It turned out that the bomber group that came from the northeast had already arrived at the top of the hill and joined with the bomber group that had been bombing back and forth around the hill a few times before. As soon as the two bomber groups joined, the atmosphere in the sky immediately changed. Even the St. Michael Knight Regiment and the others who were far away, after seeing the two bomber groups join together, subconsciously swallowed their saliva and felt cold all over. Woo woo woo. In the sky, other than the roar of the engines, there was only the screech of the aerial bombs and the roar of the missiles launched by the newly arrived missile troops that tore through the air. Missiles? Kai! Those bastards have already started using missiles. As soon as the White Cat, State Zero, saw the black shadow flying rapidly from the sky, its fur all over its body immediately stood up. Ray Minkai did not pay attention to State Zero, nor did he respond to its shouts. Instead, he used his hands and feet to firmly control the movements of the long-toothed lion. Boom, boom, boom. The roar of the engines of the missiles had already penetrated the roar of the explosions of the aerial bombs and arrived behind the long-toothed lion. The infrared radar installed at the front of the missiles had already firmly locked onto the two plasma engines on the back of the long-toothed lion that were constantly ejecting powerful and particularly obvious plasma flames. As long as the time was pushed forward slightly by 10 seconds, the missiles launched from the bombers would inevitably hit the long-toothed lion. However, this was only something that would happen under normal circumstances. Just as the swarm of missiles was about to hit the long-toothed lion, the two plasma thrusters on the back of the long-toothed lion actually shifted to the left by 30 degrees. In an instant, it forced the long-toothed lion to make an emergency maneuver to the right under the high-speed maneuver state. Whoosh! Suddenly, the missiles that had firmly locked onto the plasma engines lost their target in this millisecond and could only fly forward until they hit the ground and exploded. Boom! 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 In the face of these missiles that were closely following behind, the long-toothed lion only used the two plasma engines on its back that could change direction by 90 degrees and easily shook off the incoming missiles, causing them to fall to the ground in vain, bursting into beautiful fireworks for the long-toothed lion. Even the missiles failed. Damn it! What is the origin of this lion? It feels like a real beast. The long-toothed lion's relaxed posture of defusing the missile attack made the bomber group, which had just completed the rendezvous and whose morale had been boosted, once again suffer a blow. However, these setbacks did not make the bomber group lose their fighting spirit. One must know that what they were targeting was only a steel beast that could only run on the ground. In this environment where there was almost no threat to the bomber group, it was only a matter of time for them to kill this steel beast. However, in the previous few exchanges, the attitude of the long-toothed lion had already made the proud bomber group feel that they were being despised. So Kai, those flies are lowering their altitude. The white cat, State Zero, who had been paying attention to the bomber group's movements, saw that the bomber group seemed to be lowering their altitude and further increasing their bombing strength, and quickly shouted. State Zero had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Roger. Ray Minkai nodded and shouted casually. Your Highness Cornelia, it may be a little hot later. Please be careful. Hot. Cornelia, who was sitting in the back seat, was stunned and did not understand Ray Minkai's meaning at all. Literally, State Zero will use another form later, and by then, the temperature in the cockpit will probably increase a little. Your Highness, please be careful. The temperature in the cockpit will increase? Cornelia nodded as if she understood and responded. Ray Minkai knew that Cornelia had not fully understood, but he knew that in another 2 or 3 minutes, Cornelia would understand what he meant. State Zero, are you ready? On standby. Let's teach those annoying flies a lesson. Roar. The predator lion let out a roar and changed its movement. It suddenly jumped towards the cliffs on both sides, and with the help of the plasma engine's powerful thrust, it jumped back and forth between the cliffs on both sides until it reached the top of the mountain. This strange action made the bombers that were plowing and cleaning the ground behind the predator lion fall into a daze once again. See, sir, that beast has stopped. What? The bomber group's commander was also stunned and then excitedly clenched his fist. Very good, since you're not running. Then obediently accept your death. On the top of the mountain, the predator lion stood there, slightly raising its head to look at the bomber group that covered the sky. Even if the bomber group flew over its head quickly, the predator lion still fearlessly exposed its steel body to the threat of the bomber group. It's coming. Kai! After the bomber group flew over its head and cut into the bombing route again, the white cat State Zero shouted again. Wait, now is not the time. Ray Minkai's gaze was also fixed on the bomber group that had turned and attacked again. There was only one chance. As long as the predator lion revealed its trump card that could threaten the bomber group that covered the sky and the sun would definitely be frightened and scatter. If they wanted to obtain the greatest result that was enough to shock the enemy, Ray Minkai and even State Zero had to be patient and wait for the best opportunity to arrive. Suddenly, after completing the turn, the bomber group that had entered the attacking angle once again lit up with flashes of light one after another. That was the light emitted by the engine after the missile left the belly of the plane. State Zero, Your Highness Cornelia, get ready, Ray Minkai shouted, and his hands immediately held the joystick tightly. Cornelia, who was sitting at the back, held the armrest tightly with both hands and buried her body in the pilot's seat. The next moment, a sharp whistle came. Boom, boom, boom. The missiles fired by the bomber group finally drowned the predator lion. In an instant, the mountaintop where the predator lion was located had been engulfed by the flames that erupted from the missiles, and the billowing smoke almost drowned the entire mountaintop. However, this scene was still not enough for the bomber group to vent their anger. After chasing for so long, using up several bases, and almost emptying the aviation bombs, the bomber group finally caught the opportunity to blow up the predator lion, the hateful and escaping beast in their eyes, into the sky. Therefore, every bomber that flew over the mountaintop where the predator lion was located was not stingy with the aviation bombs and missiles they carried, and smashed towards the mountaintop in one breath. At this moment, the bomber group seemed to want to use the predator lion as a target, wantonly declaring their power to the St. Michael Knight Regiment. It's over. Shang Luo looked through the binoculars and saw that the mountaintop had been engulfed by the missiles and aviation bombs, and could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, Xia Yingqing, who was standing next to him, smiled slightly. No, that beast will not be destroyed like this. The Air Force has underestimated it too much. As soon as Xian finished speaking, The billowing smoke that drowned the mountaintop and the sea of fire that filled the sky actually began to roll. This rolling was not caused by missiles or aviation bombs. Instead, it seemed that something was nurturing in the thick smoke in the depths of the sea of fire. Roar! Suddenly, an angry roar that resounded throughout the world tore through the sky. Buzz boom! As the thick smoke was torn apart and the sea of fire was dispersed, two golden rays of light tore through the sky and flashed through the center of the bomber group's formation at lightning speed. Immediately after, the bomber in the position where the golden light passed by suddenly encountered some kind of force and was torn apart like paper. In the end, it turned into bright sparks that bloomed in the sky. However, this was not the end. The moment the golden light broke through the thick smoke and tore through the sky, the sea of fire that drowned the mountaintop was also dispersed by figures that flew into the sky from the depths of the sea of fire. But, buzz! The hum of the engine, at this moment, replaced the noise of missiles and aviation bombs, becoming the absolute protagonist at this moment. As the white tail smoke extended from the depths of the sea of fire, brazenly pierced through the sky, accurately hitting the bombers soaring in the sky, wildly exploding wantonly among the bombers, scattering the fragments they carried in the sky, a figure that should have been destroyed by the bomber group's attack slowly appeared from the depths of the gradually dissipating sea of fire. It was a steel body wrapped in dark green armor. On its back were two huge cannons with huge calibers. Hanging from its shoulders, waist, and feet were missiles of astonishing power. In the sky, the missiles and cannons shot out by the steel beast that had been replaced with dark green armor. The wreckage of the bomber that had been blown up by the cannons dragged the burning wreckage and fell into the hills like a rainstorm, landing around the steel behemoth. In an instant, the hills turned into a purgatory engulfed by a sea of fire. Shan Lo, who witnessed the whole process through a telescope, inexplicably remembered a story that the elders in his family told him when he was young. I saw a knight riding a white horse and holding a longbow. He symbolized victory. I saw a knight riding a red horse, in charge of authority, holding a blade. He symbolized war. I saw a knight riding a black horse, in charge of wealth, holding a balance. He symbolized famine. I saw a knight riding a green horse, in charge of death, holding a sickle. He symbolized death. Call out his name, Apocalypse. Chapter 205. Undisciplined morale had always been the tradition of Langlan Shi Kingdom, and it was also the sword of Damocles hanging above Xian's head. However, today he saw a situation that had never been so high in morale. Under the leadership of the huge body of steel that had been fighting at the forefront of the front line, the soldiers of the Langlan Shi Kingdom showed an unprecedented high morale. They were focused on the battle, shouting the battle cry, accurately and efficiently executing all tactical actions and conveying orders to all parts of the front line. We won. A dull but familiar voice sounded beside Xian. Xian already knew the identity of the person without looking back. Your Excellency Zero, it seems that we have made the right choice. That princess isn't as useless as I thought she was. The person who came was Zero. There were a few mocking chuckles under the black mask. General, don't underestimate Euphemia Libertania, the third princess. Although she is not as famous as the other princes and princesses, her talent is among the best among the princes and princesses. If you look down on Her Royal Highness Euphemia, because of her weak appearance, I'm afraid you will be the one to suffer. Xian pondered for a moment and nodded slowly. He looked up at the active front line, destroying all the enemies that blocked the front line one by one. However, there were some questions that puzzled Xian. Your Excellency Zero, don't you think that Her Royal Highness has been merciful too many times? Xian's words naturally referred to the soldiers of the Brittany army, and even the pilots who were supposed to be destroyed. Most of them were spared by Euphemia, and after showing her identity, she ordered them to surrender to the soldiers of Langlan Shi Kingdom who came later. Of course, there would naturally be some soldiers and pilots who would not listen to the orders issued by Euphemia, and instead they would stubbornly attack Pirate Gouda, who was piloted by Euphemia. At this time, either Pirate Gouda personally obliterated them, or the Black Knight around Pirate Gouda would do it for him. Merciful General, you are gravely mistaken to think so. After we win this battle, and even the knight successfully rescues Cornelia Li Britannia, what do you plan to do? Should we continue to be on the defensive, or should we make peace? Facing Xion's question, Zero raised an even sharper question. Jean was stunned, and the answer naturally surfaced. However, this wasn't the answer he wanted. It came from the Council of 40. Naturally, it's to negotiate for peace. From the very beginning, this battle wasn't approved by the Council of 40. It was only because I suggested that the direct troops, the Black Knight Regiment, and the princess as the main force that it was approved. Therefore, even if we win this battle and recover the lost land, the Council of 40 will still use various reasons to restrict our next actions. Humph, what a fool. It looks like those big shots, sitting in the gorgeous ballroom, didn't see the scene of us obtaining the weapon of victory. Zero smiled coldly, her words full of disdain. Weapon of victory. Jean subconsciously cast his gaze towards the Pirate Gouda, who had already broken through the defensive line and completely seized the mission target city. No matter what kind of terrifying mecha the Britannia side sent out, they couldn't even last one round against the Pirate Gouda. Their machine guns, howitzers, longswords, and pikes couldn't penetrate the cloak that was formed from the strange silver liquid that was draped over the Gundam's body. Such a strong defense, in addition to the beam rifle in the Pirate Gouda's hand that could penetrate 5 Sunderland in one shot, it was simply the perfect killing weapon in Jean's heart. The Pirate Gouda? No, this can't be considered a weapon of victory. General, Zero knew what Xion was thinking, but he still handed over a tablet computer. This is the information from the spy in St. Petersburg 10 minutes ago. It's the movement of the Knight Regiment. What? There's news already? Jean was shocked, hurriedly reached out to take it, and opened it to take a look. In an instant, Jean's face turned sluggish. After a long time, Jean took a few deep breaths and slowly relaxed his body. Sir Zero, is this real? Jean pointed at the cliff that was covered in a sea of fire. And on this cliff, there was a steel beast covered in dark green heavy armor. Countless fireballs trailing thick smoke fell from the sky like meteors, fluttering and falling around this steel beast. And in the upper part of the screen, at a glance, there were no less than 100 bombers frantically escaping from the siege of missiles launched from the ground. As long as Jean paid a little attention, those missiles that made the bombers flee in panic were actually launched by the steel beast standing on the cliff. At the same time, on the back of the steel beast, the 2 cannons that seemed to have terrifying power fired again and again at the bombers, enough to set off a storm. If there's no problem with the spies I sent, then this battle is real. Maybe we've already won this war. As long as we maintain a good relationship with Her Highness Princess Euphemia and her Knight Regiment. Jean took a deep breath and nodded. I understand. Presumably, everyone in Department Q has suffered a lot. Come, let the medical team be ready at any time. After rescuing everyone in Department Q, immediately treat our friends. Boom! When the rumbling sound came from the distance, the violent vibration of the explosion was transmitted along the surface all the way to an underground facility hidden in the depths of the city, making the chandelier hanging on the ceiling shake back and forth. Ah, we're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. Suddenly, a somewhat hysterical male voice reverberated back and forth in the empty corridor. Roy, shut up. Please don't say that. A female voice followed, trying to stop the hysteria of the man. Ah, isn't it? Cecil, we're all going to die. My research, my Lancelot, and the Valkyrie is gone just like that. I don't want to die. I want to continue to study my body. Shut up. While the man and woman were arguing, a cold female voice sounded from the other side of the room. The two were stunned and shut their mouths. Royd, Cecil, maybe we don't have to die today. Following the sound of footsteps, a brown-faced man with a delicate face appeared behind the railing. Beretta, what do you mean? Royd asked puzzledly. Literally. Now the city is in the middle of a battle. At this time, only Langlon West and the Black Knight Regiment can make this battlefield fall into the flames of war at this time. Looking at the situation, we'll be saved soon. Veretta looked up at the chandelier that was shaking more and more, shook her head and sighed. Hey, if we're saved, does that mean Her Highness Cornelia is going to be saved? Cecil pondered for a moment and immediately exclaimed, I'm afraid that's the case. After all, St. Petersburg is located in the depths of the Britannia Empire. Whether it's Langlon West or the Black Knight Regiment, they don't have enough troops to break through the defense line. In this case, rescuing us and rescuing Department Q is the only choice. As soon as Veretta's voice fell, there was a violent crash at the end of the corridor. Boom! Hey, what? What's the situation? Cecil, go and see what's the situation. Royd was startled and jumped to the corner subconsciously. Cecil shook his head helplessly as he watched his boss become more and more crazy. Boom! 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 With a more violent roar, the door at the end of the corridor was blown open. A series of figures quickly rushed into the underground facility in the smoke, and after eliminating all factors that could threaten them with a well-trained formation and tacit understanding, they finally came to the room where Veretta was. Veretta knew, the person in charge of Department Q, right? A burly figure looked at Veretta's face, took off the mask on his face, and asked, Yes, I'm Veretta New. You are? Veretta looked at the person's face and found that he was not a member of the Black Knight Regiment that she was familiar with. Hello, Veretta New. We belong to the Special Forces of Langlon West. I'm Captain Sanjis. Now we're here to rescue you and Department Q. Don't worry, you're safe. The rescue operation went smoothly. After Veretta, Royd, and Cecil were rescued, the rest of the members of Department Q who were imprisoned in other places were all rescued. They were examined and treated by the medical team sent by Xeon in the temporarily cleared square. But Veretta stood at the intersection, silently waiting for someone's arrival. Rumble. In the roar of the engine, Pirate Gauda's figure appeared in the sky above the square. After discovering Veretta's figure, he slowly landed not far in front of Veretta. Sir, Veretta muttered the name of the sir in her heart and immediately ran over. But she was surprised to find that it was a woman who walked out of Pirate Gauda's cockpit. Her Highness Euphemia. Long time no see. Veretta, you've worked hard during this time. Euphemia, who was wearing a pilot uniform, walked to Veretta gracefully and nodded slightly. Princess, Your Highness, I'm very sorry. I lost my composure. Congratulations on your recovery, Your Highness. Her Highness Euphemia. In shock, Veretta was a little incoherent for a while. No, you don't have to. Veretta, you should go for treatment first. Don't worry, the city is safe. Subconsciously listening to Euphemia's words, Veretta, who turned around to treat the patient, suddenly asked, Your Highness, where is Sir now? Kai. Euphemia was slightly taken aback and showed a wry smile. Kai went to save Sister Royal. The rescue operation went smoothly, but now Kai is in some trouble. Chapter 206. Trouble would always come knocking on your door unknowingly, even if you had taken all kinds of precautions in advance. Rayming Kai's current situation was like this. Although he and State Zero had killed more than half of the bomber group and scared away the remaining bombers, they were able to escape from the hill that had been bombed to the point of devastation. Even the top of the hill had been flattened by several meters. However, at the same time, Ray Minkai found that the situation of Cornelia, who was sitting in the back seat, did not seem to be very good. The reason for this could be attributed to the rare eruption of the long-fanged lion. When it evolved from the Leo long-fanged lion to the Bonza a long-fanged lion, the heavy armor on its body was far beyond what the long-fanged lion could bear. The temperature of the long-fanged lion, as well as the temperature of the cockpit, had a sharp rise. This was something that Lei Minkai and State Zero had expected. However, what they did not expect was that when it evolved into the Bonza long-fanged lion, the surrounding space also ignited under the bombing of the bomber group. Ray Minkai could still bear the overload of the long-fanged lion's high temperature, coupled with the sharp rise in the external temperature. But after a period of house arrest, Cornelia, whose physical condition was not as good as before, showed signs of catching Ray Minkai off guard. Cornelia's body temperature rose sharply, and her whole person fell into a state of blurred consciousness. Ray Minkai really did not expect that Cornelia would show signs of heat stroke, and it did not look light. Trouble. After leaving the hill for some distance, Ray Minkai had to stop the long-fanged lion's journey. He found a forest nearby and moved Cornelia, who had fallen into a coma, from the cockpit, which was still in a high-temperature state, to the shade of the tree. Humans are really fragile. A white light flashed, and the long-fanged lion disappeared. As its core, the white cat, State Zero, jumped a few times in the air and landed beside Cornelia. I was careless. Now, he had to cool down Cornelia as soon as possible. State Zero, can you stay here and look after Cornelia? Ray Minkai placed his hand on Cornelia's forehead and felt that the situation was not optimistic. Ever since Ray Minkai met Cornelia, the impression that Cornelia gave him and others was that she was a capable, strong, determined, and decisive woman. Sometimes, under this strong appearance, most people subconsciously thought of Cornelia as a veteran general who had galloped on the battlefield, and not as a princess who lived in the depths of the palace. Because of this, after Ray Minkai rescued Cornelia, he subconsciously ignored the problem of Cornelia's physical decline during the house arrest. Let me go. The nearest water source was at least 1,000 meters away. I'll leave this place to you. Otherwise, do you want me to use my claws or my teeth to take care of this fragile human? White Cat State Zero raised its little paw and shook it. Ray Minkai was silent for a moment. Do you have something to hold water? Tisk. That kind of thing, do I need it? Kai, don't underestimate me. White Cat State Zero snorted, turned around, jumped onto a branch at the side, and disappeared among the leaves. Phew, phew. As soon as White Cat State Zero left, Cornelia's breathing suddenly became rapid. Ray Minkai was shocked and reached out his hand to check again. Not good. Her body temperature has gone up again. In a hurry, Ray Minkai casually searched and found that there seemed to be emergency food in his waist bag that he had prepared before the departure. Among them, there seemed to be a pack of drinking water. After searching for a while, Ray Minkai finally found the pack of drinking water, but was immediately stopped by another problem. Towel. Without hesitation, Ray Minkai reached out and tore a piece from his sleeve, used it as a towel, wet it with drinking water, and put it on Cornelia's forehead. I hope she can hold on for a while. The moment the cold, wet towel was placed on her forehead, Cornelia's face seemed to have eased a little, but it was still frighteningly pale. Sweat kept coming out, and in the blink of an eye, her beautiful purple-red hair was wet. Your Highness Cornelia, hold on. After some time, when White Cat State Zero came back with a jar full of water, Cornelia's face became extremely pale, and the temperature that had just dropped rose again. Sorry, I came back late. Without waiting for Ray Minkai to reprimand, White Cat State Zero apologized first. It's good that you came back in time. Ray Minkai nodded, but no expression could be seen on his face. He just took the towel, wet it, twisted it slightly, and put it on Cornelia's forehead. Minkai, when I want to get water just now, I found a hunter's hut nearby. Maybe we can find some medicine there. White Cat State Zero saw that Ray Minkai was silent and only changed the wet towel for Cornelia back and forth, so it quickly said, Hunter's hut, is it nearby? Ray Minkai's hand movements paused and asked back, Yes, it's not far away. I've observed there shouldn't be anyone living there. White Cat State Zero nodded. Ray Minkai muttered to himself for a moment before raising his head to look at the sun that had risen into the sky. He then pulled Cornelia into his embrace. Let's go. State Zero. Follow me. Perhaps Ray Minkai's movements were too loud when he was running. Cornelia, who was in a coma, actually opened her eyes in a daze and looked at Ray Minkai in a half-awake state. Am I dead? The usual calm and steady voice became so fragile and soft at this time, and Ray Minkai even had the illusion that Cornelia might die in the next moment. "No, Your Highness, you're not dead yet. Hold on a little longer." Ray Minkai quickened his pace to buy more time to run to the hunter's hut to find medicine that could lower Cornelia's body temperature. Is it? Kai, if there's no. Cornelia's voice became softer and softer until she couldn't even finish a sentence and fell weakly in Ray Minkai's arms. The pair of hands that could drive the nightmare fell weakly. "TSK, State Zero, go faster." Ray Minkai gritted his teeth and suddenly burst out with an even faster speed. He carried the unconscious Cornelia and ran ahead of the White Cat State Zero. "Kai, you're going all out, aren't you?" While the White Cat State Zero was surprised, they finally arrived at the hunter's hut hidden in the woods. As soon as they entered the hut, Ray Minkai casually glanced at the layout of the hut and immediately placed Cornelia on the wooden bed by the window, then turned around and rummaged through the wooden cabinet. In the end, he could be considered lucky. Ray Minkai found some medicine that could be used on Cornelia. This might be due to the fact that the hunter's hut's owner was usually prepared. After confirming the effective date of production, Ray Minkai carefully fed the medicine to Cornelia. Then, Ray Minkai's eyes glanced at something that seemed to be placed in the corner of the room. State Zero turned back into a lion. Ray Minkai looked back at the White Cat State Zero, who sat by the door and refused to come in even if he was beaten to death. Because this hunter's hut was uninhabited for a long time, the entire hut was filled with dust. The wooden bed that Cornelia was on was still close to the window, so was not affected. But because of this, the White Cat State Zero did not take a step into the hut. "What?" The White Cat State Zero looked down at the dusty floor and seemed to be hesitant. "Carry this wooden bucket and fill it with water." Ray Minkai turned and walked to the corner of the room and knocked on the thing placed there. "You know, it's fine if you want me to get water. Why do you want me to carry water? I'm a long-toothed lion." Long-toothed lion State Zero. "How can I carry a wooden bucket to fill it with water?" The White Cat State Zero looked down at the dusty floor and shook his head. That look made Ray Minkai so angry that he couldn't vent his anger. Normally, when this guy was fighting, he would fearlessly run into the cannon fire. Why did he stop in front of mere dust? Turn back into a lion. Carry the water. Ray Minkai shouted coldly. The White Cat State Zero's gaze wandered back and forth between Ray Minkai and the wooden bucket, and then raised its little paw. "Cherry Stone, looting a burning house." Ray Minkai did not realize that the White Cat State Zero had such a virtuous face. "Okay, go and get me water. After we go back, you can eat whatever you want with Cherry Stone." Ray Minkai gritted his teeth and agreed. "Deal." A white light flashed, and a white, flawless, mighty and majestic white lion rushed into the hunter's hut. In the blink of an eye, it ran out carrying a wooden bucket that was big enough for an adult to sit on. In a daze, the heat that spread throughout her body seemed to have dissipated a lot, and she did not know when her whole body had become cold. As the cold spread, her confused consciousness gradually woke up. Not long after she murmured, Cornelia suddenly opened her eyes due to the vigilance that she had developed from galloping on the battlefield. She cautiously sized up the surrounding situation. Other than herself, there was no one else in the wooden hut. The furniture was messy, and the wooden bed with her clothes. Wait, clothes? Her clothes? The moment she realized that her clothes were placed on the wooden bed, Cornelia realized that she was sitting in a large wooden bucket filled with cold water. In a panic, Cornelia's memory began to recover at this moment. The unbearable heat, the continuous roar of the cannons, the roar of the fighter jets shook the sky, and the continuous impact of the explosions. These scenes were like purgatory, and they were Cornelia's last memories before she lost consciousness. Wait! Suddenly, Cornelia seemed to remember that she seemed to have been carried by Ray Minkai while running in the woods. And in the midst of it, Cornelia also vaguely remembered that Ray Minkai said that he would not let her die. Then I was saved by Kai. Cornelia's consciousness became clearer, allowing her to quickly understand the current situation. Kai, you're outside, right? Frowning, Cornelia showed a rare trace of hesitation. I'm here. Your Highness, you're awake? Is there any problem with your body? Raymond Kai's voice came from outside the door, as expected. These. No, I'm just a little tired. Cornelia was just about to ask about her current condition, but she changed her mind and said, All right, I'm just a little tired. Is that so? That's good. If your Highness can get up by yourself, you can change your clothes. I made some meat soup outside. If your Highness is hungry, you can go out and try it. Raymond Kai's voice paused for a moment, and then he continued, Your Highness, don't worry about the pursuers. Right now, they're probably still circling around that hill. Chapter 207. Under the starry sky, a pair of bonfires burned brightly, elongating the silhouettes of the man and woman sitting around the bonfires. The aroma of the meat soup made Cornelia, who had just survived a life-and-death situation, twitch her lips. However, she still maintained the most basic etiquette and finished the bowl of meat soup in her hand. Thank you very much, Guy. Cornelia put down the empty bowl in her hand and nodded slightly. It's all right. The conditions are simple. I hope your Highness doesn't mind. Ray Minkai gestured that there was still room for another bowl. At present, the kitchen utensils that Ray Minkai used to cook the meat soup were found in the hunter's hut. As for the main ingredient of the meat soup, the rabbit, was caught by a certain lion who took advantage of the situation to loot from the forest. There's no need. This bowl is enough. Cornelia shook her head and said subconsciously, In the past, when the battle at the front lines was intense, this bowl of meat soup might only be enjoyed once every few days. No way. Ray Minkai was shocked when he heard Cornelia say this. As the second princess of the Empire, even if Cornelia led the charge at the front lines, with the Empire's strong support, Cornelia's life on the battlefield should not be so difficult. Yes, I asked for myself. Although the Empire's strength is very strong, it is unable to take into account all aspects when fighting on multiple fronts. Therefore, when it is not necessary, I will let the logistics department treat everyone equally. There's no need to spend too many resources on me alone. Cornelia's gaze fell on the bonfire. She stared at the swaying flames and slowly talked about her past when she was fighting for the Empire all over the world. Perhaps it was because she had survived a life-and-death situation. Or perhaps it was because she sensed that Ray Minkai wanted to save her. The current Cornelia inadvertently had a hint of gentleness. As she spoke, Cornelia raised her head and looked at the starry sky above the forest. However, the knight behind me, Gilbert, Dalton, and the others have all died in battle. When Ray Minkai heard this, he was silent for a moment. He put down the spoon in his hand and let it swirl slightly in his boiling flesh. Perhaps this is the fate of a knight. Your Highness, please do not grieve for Gilbert and Dalton. As long as you're alive, their sacrifice will be meaningful. Does it mean anything? Cornelia laughed at herself. The entire Knight Corps has been sacrificed, leaving only me alive. This was perhaps the greatest irony of all. We have risked our lives together on the battlefield so many times. They are no longer my knight or my adjutant. They are more like my brothers, my family. The atmosphere fell silent again. Ray Minkai wasn't good at comforting others, so he didn't know what to say at that moment. He could only silently watch the crackling of the bonfire. After a long time, Ray Minkai's eyes flashed, and he took out a personal terminal from his pocket. Your Highness, for you. Cornelia, who was still in grief, subconsciously raised her head to look at the octagonal object in Ray Minkai's hand. It was crystal clear and looked like a work of art. This is my personal terminal. Through this, you can contact UFFI and Her Highness Euphemia. Perhaps there are some things that are easier for the two Highnesses to talk about. Ray Minkai raised his hand and tapped on it. A holographic projection lit up from the personal terminal. UFFI? Wait, if you come to save me, then wouldn't UFFI? Suddenly, Cornelia seemed to have realized something, but in the next moment, her attention was drawn to the changing holographic screen. Kai? Is that Kai? As soon as Euphemia's voice sounded, A face that Cornelia was very familiar with appeared on the holographic screen. UFFI. It's really you. Where are you now? Cornelia exclaimed, then was surprised by the pajamas that Euphemia was wearing. According to her speculation, since Ray Minkai had already come here to save her, then Euphemia must be on the other side, participating in the rescue of Department Q. In other words, they should be in the middle of an intense battle now. Why was Euphemia wearing pajamas? Also, there seemed to be a few round dolls jumping back and forth around her, constantly calling out, "Hello, hello, 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 little dolls." Sister Royal? It's Sister Royal. Sister Royal, you've woken up. How's your body? Do you still feel hot? When the two sisters began to communicate, Ray Minkai quietly took the pot of meat soup from the bonfire and put it aside. After that, he slowly retreated a distance, leaving space for the sisters, Cornelia and Euphemia. Really unromantic. Kai. Ray Minkai had just walked behind a big tree when the voice of the white cat, State Zero, came from above. Then, Ray Minkai's shoulders sank, and the white cat, State Zero, jumped down from above and landed on his shoulder. Unromantic? Maybe. Also, State Zero, if you jump down like this, won't he crush me? You have to know that your weight is calculated in tons. Ray Minkai glanced at the white cat, State Zero, and said bluntly, "Weight? This body is at most the standard weight of cat. It won't cause any pressure on your body." The white cat, State Zero, snorted and said lazily, "This is your power." Of course. Otherwise, how do you think this weak body can transform into a mechanical beast with a steel body in the blink of an eye? Kai, as a community with a shared destiny, you don't have to be entangled in this aspect. The white cat, lying on Ray Minkai's shoulder, shook its paws and expressed its disdain for Ray Minkai's obsession with unnecessary matters. Ray Minkai smiled and looked back at Cornelia, who was still sitting by the bonfire, holding a personal terminal and chatting with Euphemia. After that, he retreated a distance again. State Zero, is the Bonza form all of your power? After looking up at the starry sky above his head, Ray Minkai asked the question in his heart. Bonza? How is that possible? As the core of the world, how can I only have these forms? Kai, you may be able to forget other things. However, you must remember this clearly. The white cat, State Zero's expression suddenly became serious. Even its lazy posture on Ray Minkai's shoulder had unknowingly changed to a squatting posture. As the fragments are recovered, my power will also be restored. Therefore, other than the current Leo, Skanita, and Bonza forms, there will be more forms in the future. Is that so? It sounds similar to a collectible game. Every time the collection reaches a new stage, new elements will be unlocked. State Zero, other than the forms, you should have other abilities, right? Ray Minkai chuckled. Perhaps. It's just that when my power is fully restored, our hometown may be revived. State White Cat Zero shook its small head, and its tone was a little uncertain. Is that so? According to the current situation, we can only collect fragments. Ray Minkai thought about it and returned to the problem of State Zero's form. State Zero, if we collect other fragments, what will be the next form? Heavy armor, long-fanged lion? Or other types of long-toothed lions? How would I know? The white cat, State Zero, glared at Ray Minkai and growled. The next day, early morning, after a night's rest, Ray Minkai woke up early in the morning and prepared breakfast. According to Cornelia's current situation, she should be able to withstand the load brought by the high-speed movement of the Leo long-toothed lion. Although there was still a long way to go before she could fully withstand the high overload of the Leo long-toothed lion, Ray Minkai felt that it should not be a big problem if it was just high-speed movement. The white cat, State Zero, also made a promise. After all, the driver's seat of the Leo long-toothed lion was also designed to offset the high overload brought by high-speed movement. As long as State Zero paid a little attention to Cornelia's condition, the problem would not be too big. In this way, if everything went well, they would be able to meet up with Euphemia and the others before sunset. However, Ray Minkai knew that the enemies who had not yet caught up would not watch the Leo long-toothed lion swagger across their territory and enter Langlon, Shi Kingdom unscathed. Therefore, Ray Minkai still had to be prepared for battle. Good morning, Kai. Along with the sound of the door being opened, Cornelia walked out of the room with a trace of redness on her face. Good morning, Your Highness. Come, breakfast is ready. Ray Minkai scooped up the fresh meat soup in the pot and handed it over. Thank you. After Cornelia thanked him, she suddenly said something that caught Ray Minkai off guard. Kai, I think the next move needs to be adjusted. And? Adjust? Need to take a roundabout route to avoid the enemy? Ray Minkai's hands paused and looked at Cornelia in surprise. The white cat state Zero lying on the side also opened its eyes and looked at Cornelia, whose aura had changed a little. In Lei Minkai's eyes, the somewhat delicate Her Highness the Empress of last night had quietly disappeared at some point. As the sun rose, the Valkyrie, the second Empress, Her Highness Cornelia, once again returned to this world. Yes, Kai, I already know UFFI's thoughts. Cornelia nodded, and her gaze became sharp. To be honest, when UFFI took the initiative to confess her thoughts, I was very surprised. I even wanted to scold UFFI on the spot for this unrealistic idea. But, Ray Minkai put down his spoon, sat up straight, and looked at the Royal Highness in front of him, whose aura gradually became sharp, like an unsheathed sword. But I saw the world that UFFI experienced with you after she left this world. At this point, Cornelia's sharp gaze became slightly dim. To be honest, I kind of wish that the person standing next to UFFI was me instead of you. But in that case, UFFI wouldn't be able to see and experience that magical world with her own eyes. Your Highness, do you believe it? Ray Minkai knew what Cornelia was referring to. He didn't expect that UFFI would choose to confess everything in her conversation with Cornelia last night. I believe it. UFFI also showed me her inspector badge. Kai, you should have one too. Ray Minkai nodded, took out his badge, and showed it to Cornelia. After Cornelia took a few glances, she slowly sighed. If the world that UFFI saw is real, then this world can't go on like this. What's more, the Empire has changed. Since my brother who came out of nowhere returned, the entire Empire has changed. It has become so strange. So, Your Highness, you want to die for the country? Yes. As the Empire's Royal Highness, I, who lost the Night Order, only have this little value. Just like Lucio and Lilina, who lost their mother. Cornelia laughed self-deprecatingly, but there wasn't much care in her expression. Obviously, Cornelia seemed to have walked out of the previous haze. What's more, UFFI is still alive. Also, she has a wish that she wants to fulfill. As her sister, I have the need to help her fulfill her wish. Then, I want to see the new world that made UFFI change. Speaking until here, Cornelia's eyes lit up with a flame called yearning. Believe me, Your Highness, your wish will come true. Yes, I will believe you. Our night. Wait, what did Cornelia say? That sentence just now seemed to contain some meaning? Did UFFI say something to her sister last night? Did she even tell Cornelia about my relationship with UFFI? However, Ray Minkai didn't dare to ask more. Arius. This small river from north to south crossed the center of a small town, providing daily water for the residents of this town. It was also set up near this town to store the cherry stone energy used by the four Great Knight Corps guarding the Britannia Empire's Europa territory. It was set up to store the cherry stone energy used by the four Great Knight Corps guarding the Europa territory of the Britannia Empire. But at the same time, because it was far away from the front line, the residents of this town, and even the soldiers responsible for guarding the energy warehouse, didn't show too much tension. At most, the soldiers were even more nervous than the residents. Is it here? Your Highness. On a hillside somewhere, Ray Minkai pressed down on the white cat state Zero, who couldn't hold back and was a little restless when it saw the energy warehouse at the foot of the mountain. Yes, if my memory is correct, this should be the Cherry Stone Energy Warehouse for the four Great Knight Corps. As long as this place is destroyed, the movements of the 4 Great Knight Corps will be greatly restricted. At least for 72 hours, their bodies won't receive any cherry stone energy. Cornelia nodded after putting down the monocular that she plundered from the prey hut. According to Cornelia's new plan, State Zero still needed to stay in the Britannia Empire's territory for a while in order to contain the 4 Great Knight Corps' movements, so that Euphemia and Zero could make some adjustments. Naturally, it was for the sake of forging a path that would allow Euphemia to ascend to the Emperor's stage. Chapter 208. Under the night sky, a raging fire was rising, engulfing the surrounding buildings. When the fire burned even more fiercely, more than half of the night sky was dyed red. In a small town not far from the fire, there was a strange smell of something burning, as well as dust falling from the sky. As the dust gradually covered the entire street, the airframes of the Britannia Empire quickly flew along the street. Under the frightened eyes of the town residents, they rushed toward the area that had been engulfed by the fire. Da-da-da-da. A rapid sound of iron hooves sounded from a distance. In the blink of an eye, a golden, eye-catching nightmare, surrounded by many Sunderland, quickly came from the north to the warehouse area that was ignited by the fire. And here, the San Rafael Knight Regiment, which was closer to the warehouse area than them, had already arrived earlier. Shinjin Hyuga Shinjin? Well, he came quickly. His Majesty the Emperor's mission hasn't been completed yet, but the energy warehouse of our 4 major knight regiments was destroyed by the princess. On the other side, in the mothership of the San Rafael Knight Regiment, the head of the Knight Regiment, Andre, snorted coldly in displeasure. Now, he still clearly remembered that after the inauguration ceremony of the new head of the San Rafael Knight Regiment, the man who took over the position of the head of the Knight Regiment from the former head, who died mysteriously, vowed to complete the former head's last wish. In the end, this was the result. Lord Farnese, Shinjin Hyuga, sent a request for a meeting. While Andre was thinking, his subordinate sent a request for a meeting. Ask him to come here. It just so happens that I also want to know about the princess and the steel beast. A few minutes later, when more and more rescue forces arrived and launched the rescue of the energy warehouse area, the 2 heads of the Knight Regiment, who hurriedly said goodbye after the inauguration ceremony, met again. The 4 major Knight Regiments were about to face an energy crisis for a period of time. Shinjin Hyuga, I didn't expect that after the inauguration ceremony, you would cause such a big commotion. Andre didn't have any expression on his face. After he said that, he looked back at the fire that was temporarily under control under the continuous reinforcement of the rescue forces. Sorry, it's my negligence. What Andre didn't expect was that Shinjin Hyuga showed a state of accepting any blame. This made Andre a little bit uncomfortable. No, this is not Shinjin Hyuga's fault. We underestimated the opponent, underestimated the power of the knight who took the 3rd princess away. At this moment, a voice that made Andre even more surprised. Andre turned around and saw that it was Augusta Henry Highland, the commander of the Britannia Empire in Europe. Hyuga, you actually came here in person. As Andre cried out in surprise, he quickly scanned the surroundings for any movements, afraid that someone would suddenly rush out from the side. No, don't worry. This place is safe for the time being. The princess and the Lion Knight have already left. Compared to Andre's caution, Augusta was much calmer. What's more, now that the Catherine Palace has been mostly destroyed, if they continue to stay there, they will only feel sad and humiliated looking at the ruined palace. Humiliation? Andre resonated with Roland's words. The 4 major Britannian Knight regiments that dominated the Europa battlefield were forced to a place where their energy was almost exhausted by a steel beast that came out of nowhere. Even if they could urgently transfer cherry stones from other areas, the 4 major knight regiments would fall into a difficult situation because of the lack of cherry stones. Hyuga, I request that the cherry stones be provided to the St. Michael Knight regiments first. Because the St. Michael Knight regiments received the order of His Majesty the Emperor to pursue the steel beast with all their strength to prevent it from continuing to cause any damage to the important facilities in our empire. At this time, Shinjin Hyuga made a request that Andre found difficult to accept. Yes, that was indeed the case. Originally, the St. Michael Knight Regiment was tasked with hunting down the second princess and the steel beast. How about this? Take a quarter of the cherry stone allowance from each of the other two knight regiments and provide it to the St. Michael Knight Regiment for the pursuit mission. How about this? Augusta pondered for a moment before coming up with a compromise. Andre also felt that this proposal should be acceptable, but he made another request. Minister Highland, Minister Xiaoyinga, I heard that your subordinate, Ashuri Ashura, has withdrawn from a mission due to his injuries. Is there such a thing? When Augusta heard this, he also looked at the letter, his eyes filled with questions. Although it was only the withdrawal of one captain, it had already affected part of St. Michael's combat power. There is indeed such a thing. We underestimated the power of the steel beast when we intercepted it. Therefore, Azura paid the price. Fortunately, he survived in the end. If that's the case, Xiaoyinga's St. Michael Knight Regiment might not be able to complete the mission of encirclement and annihilation on their own. Augusta's expression gradually turned serious. Although it makes me feel ashamed, it is the truth. Herland, Farnese, this is the video we recorded when we were encircling the steel beast. Exine gestured, and Shang Law, who was standing at the back, handed over the tablet containing the battle records with both hands. Augusta and Andre took a look at it, and their expressions changed drastically. This is the true power of that steel beast? Augusta said in shock as he pointed at the steel beast standing in the sea of fire, causing the bombers to flee at the sight of it. Xian did not answer, but used his eyes to signal Shang Luo, who was standing next to him. When Shang Luo received the signal, he slowly opened his mouth. Yes, Herland, Farnese, this is the information we have gathered so far. According to the performance of this video, we call this steel beast Apocalypse. Apocalypse? Augusta was stunned and immediately understood the meaning of Shang Luo's words. Could it be that this steel beast has companions? No, that's not it. Apocalypse seems to have two or more different forms, just like the legend of the Apocalypse Knight that has been passed down from generation to generation. While Xian was explaining, a light that others could not detect flashed past his eyes. Apocalypse Knight? Andre pondered for a moment, and when he raised his head again, he said an answer that Augusta could not refuse. Herland, since the St. Michael Knight Regiment's strength has been damaged, then I, as the commander of the St. Raphael Knight Regiment, ask you to join forces with Xiaoyinga to kill this unbridled steel beast together. Augusta frowned, and after estimating the current situation and the effects of transferring the St. Raphael Knight Regiment into the crusade against the steel beast, he slowly nodded. I allow it. Farnese, from now on, I hope that after gathering the strength of the St. Michael Knight Regiment and the St. Raphael Knight Regiment, we can kill this unbridled beast and let the traitor receive justice. Yes, everything is for the sake of the Britannia Empire. Andre and Shin stood at attention and made an oath to join forces to encircle and annihilate the tusked Lion Zero style beside the big fire that burned the Cherry Stone Reserve. Under the starry sky, 30 kilometers away from the west side of the fire, a small bonfire was quietly lit in the dusky valley. Next to the bonfire, a small white figure was comfortably stretching its body, sometimes curling up, sometimes stretching, and it seemed to have a comfortable appearance. Its posture was no different from a house cat that had eaten its fill, and it was seen by a pair of eyes that used to be aggressive, but were now much gentler. In the depths of this pair of eyes, there was a glimmer of interest in exploration. Its name is State Zero. Cornelia looked at Lame Minkai, who was roasting the game, and asked after retrieving the white cat, State Zero, who was rolling back and forth around the bonfire and consuming almost the entire storage area's cherry stones. Yes, its name is State Zero. As your highness can see, this guy's white cat appearance is used to deceive people, and its true form is the tusk lion, State Zero. Ray Minkai was flipping the game in his hand and shook his head helplessly. Originally, he just wanted to let State Zero make up for the loss when it evolved into Bangja, but he did not expect this guy to rush into the warehouse the moment Ray Minkai released the restrictions, and in just half an hour, devoured most of the cherry stones in the warehouse, and then turned into the tusk lion, State Zero, and made a ruckus. As a result, Ray Minkai raised his gaze and glanced at the east, as if he could vaguely see the sky dyed red by the fire. Tusk lion, State Zero. To be honest, when it was still a boulder, I did not expect it to have such amazing power. As soon as Cornelia's voice fell, the white cat, who was twisting around the bonfire, suddenly turned over and squatted on the ground. Human, my power is far beyond this level. Yes. Are you full now? Ray Minkai rolled his eyes and handed the roasted game to Cornelia. I'm full. But why did the taste of the cherry stones change so much? The white cat smacked its mouth and showed a disgusted face. Huh. Ray Minkai casually gave the white cat a knock on its head. It's because your taste has changed. Meow. Kai. But before Ray Minkai and the white cat could make a ruckus, Cornelia suddenly interrupted them. Kai, I'm afraid we have to be more careful in our next move. And are you afraid that the 4 major knight regiments will join hands? Ray Minkai reached out and pressed the white cat's little head and thought for a moment. The white cat, who was pressed down by Ray Minkai, snorted a few times after slapping away Ray Minkai's right hand. For major knight regiments? Are you talking about those short toys? Even if there are hundreds of them, I won't be afraid. The white cat, whose energy had been replenished, raised its little head proudly. If it's just the 4 major knight regiments, I won't be worried. What I'm worried about is the person sitting on the throne, my brother, Lucio V. Britannia. Emperor Lucio. Upon hearing this name, Lei Minkai's expression couldn't help but become solemn. Your Highness, did Zero mention anything to you? Ray Minkai, who thought for a while, asked tentatively. Zero? Yes. Cornelia nodded. When my knight regiment rescued me and received the help of Zero and the Black Knight Regiment, Zero had already told me everything. What I didn't expect was that my brother would turn into 2 people. One is Zero, who I've always wanted to get rid of, and the other is His Majesty, the Emperor who ascended the throne and sent my sister to the gallows in the name of treason. In the end, Cornelia showed a mocking smile. This world is really wonderful. Then, Your Highness, are you worried that the Emperor will find out about our plan? Ray Minkai felt that the movements he made here could not be hidden from the Emperor. No, I'm not worried. On the contrary, I hope that Emperor Lucio can see through our movements. Cornelia's pupils bloomed with vigor. See through? Ray Minkai thought for a while and subconsciously gathered all the situations in the European continent in his mind. After comparing and analyzing them one by one, he was surprised to find that under this situation, there was a lack of a capital that should have appeared but did not appear to disrupt the situation. Lucio. No. It should be said that in the original work, after being brainwashed by Charles, he became the advisor of the Britannia Empire in Europe as Julius Kingsley. Lucio V. Britannia. Now that there was a lack of this power to break the situation, Langlon West could still rely on a natural advantage brought by the Black Forest to defend against the Britannia Empire's attack and safely pass through a period of self-righteous peace. Now, he and Euphemia had returned and became one of the key factors in the European battlefield. In this situation, the European battlefield might have... No, it should be said that it was time to change the situation. Kai, now we have to race against time. Cornelia threw the dead branch in her hand into the bonfire and looked up to the west, as if looking at the other side of the ocean, the imperial capital called Pandora. As long as the Emperor knows about the changes here, he will definitely respond immediately. At that time, the Knight of the Round Table will be sent here to snipe you, me, and even Euphemia. On the other side of the ocean, the imperial capital, Pandora, under the gaze of the guards on both sides, a pair of tall men and women, each with long blonde hair and dark gray hair, wearing a green cloak and a purple cloak, slowly walked along the red carpet and between the imperial seats. The third knight, Kino Bienbrook, and the ninth knight, Nanette Aniagalam, are here to see the emperor. Greetings, your majesty. The third knight, named Kino Bienbrook, and the ninth knight, named Nanette Aniagalam, knelt down to the man sitting on the throne. Stand up, knight of the round table. Raise your heads. Let me see what you look like. The emperor's voice came from the throne. Yes, your majesty. After the two responded, they stood up in unison and looked up at the throne. Just like the rumors. The third knight, Kino Bienbrook, is really a handsome man. No wonder so many noble ladies fall in love with you. The emperor saw the third knight's appearance clearly and smiled, praising his outstanding appearance. Thank you, your majesty, for your praise. The third knight, Kino, bowed and thanked the emperor. The ninth knight, Nanette Aniagalam. As expected of the female knight, whose swordsmanship was praised by Bismarck. Seeing you today, you are indeed valiant, formidable, and imposing. Your majesty is exaggerating. I am far from being praised by the first knight. The female knight, who had outstanding swordsmanship and a strong aura, bowed slightly. Is that so? The emperor chuckled. He changed the topic and brought it in another direction. The ninth knight, Nanette Aniagalam, raise your head. Answer my question. Did you have a relationship with the second Princess Cornelia Libertania as a senior when you were in the school? Nanette Aniagalam's expression changed slightly, but she still nodded and admitted the question. Yes, your majesty. I once had a relationship with the second, no, with the traitor. Then, can you execute her? The emperor's voice became cold. Nanette, the ninth knight's expression changed again, but she still said firmly, your majesty. Very good. The third knight, the ninth knight, raise your heads. Kino and Nanette, the two knights of the round table, did not doubt him and subconsciously raised their heads again. However, just at this moment, a ray of light rose above the throne. In the name of Emperor Lucio V. Britannia, I order you, kill Euphemia Britannia, no matter what method you use. In the blink of an eye, a circle of demonic red light appeared in the eyes of Kino and Nanette. They shouted slogans at the emperor in a daze. Yes, your majesty. After the two left, the figure of Dr. Cicely walked out of the shadows. Your majesty. Doctor, you're finally here. Is there any progress in C's world? No. Charles is still resisting. For a short period of time, we can only be in a state of tug-of-war. Is that so? However, this is nothing. Let's proceed according to the plan. Yes, your majesty. After a while, the emperor was surprised to find that Dr. Cicely did not turn around and leave as usual. Instead, he showed a hesitant look. Doctor, are you thinking about the order I just gave? Yes, your majesty. Actually, there's no need to be so troublesome, right? Troublesome? The emperor was a little surprised, but he did not show anything. It's not troublesome. Whether it's that lion or Cornelia, they should be concerned about Euphemia. As long as something happens to Euphemia, even if they can turn the whole of Europe upside down, they will definitely rush back to Euphemia's side immediately. So, we don't need to spend extra effort playing hide and seek. As for the 4 major knight regiments in Europe, let them play hide and seek with that lion and stall for time. Chapter 209. Roar. Bursts of roars constantly sounded in the wilderness, tormenting the courage of the soldiers who gradually surrounded them from all directions. More than 10 hours ago, through aerial reconnaissance, Xian and Andre discovered that the steel beast they had been thinking about had appeared once again. And this time, the steel beast that had severely damaged the energy reserves of the 4 knight regiments had once again targeted the last energy reserves of the 4 knight regiments, the energy reserves that had just been transferred to the other 2 knight regiments. In order to protect the remaining energy reserves, as well as to avenge their humiliation, Xian and Andre created a net in an attempt to encircle and kill the steel beast that had destroyed the energy reserves of the 4 knight regiments. However, it seemed insignificant, but the soldiers who were vaguely spreading the tentacles of the net were inadvertently frightened by the elusive steel beast. No one knew how the steel beast appeared. Even if there is only an inconspicuous pile of grass in front of you, a huge mouth full of sharp teeth would unwittingly extend out and bite the soldier who was caught off guard. Of course, these unfortunate soldiers were just scared out of their wits and were not swallowed by the terrifying big mouth. These panicked and cowardly soldiers, after being rescued by their allies, became the beginning of a nightmare. The elusive steel beast, under the praise of these frightened soldiers, was described as a demon that had awakened from hell, an emissary of Satan. Some people even took the name of the apocalypse that Shang Luo had inadvertently given to the steel beast as the mighty name of the steel beast. Apocalypse demonic lion? Ray Minkai loosened his right hand and threw the soldiers he had interrogated together in disgust. He was surprised to see the white cat, State Zero, lying lazily on a tree branch. In the interrogation just now, perhaps Ray Minkai's interrogation methods were brilliant, or perhaps the white cat's mighty name was too fierce. The interrogation process was exceptionally smooth. However, Lei Minkai felt that the reason why the interrogation process went so smoothly was probably due to State White Cat Zero's seemingly unintentional, but in fact, it was a deliberate act of intimidation. Anyone who saw a cute kitten suddenly turn into a fierce lion with a bloody mouth would be scared out of their wits, right? Kai, what's the result? Cornelia came out from behind the trees, glanced at the soldiers who had fainted from fright, and asked. As expected, they thought that they could not confront the lion Fong, so they wanted to make a net here to force the lion Fong to move here. Looking at the map that Ray Minkai had drawn on the soldiers' bodies, Cornelia frowned slightly. It's too obvious. Ray Minkai threw the tree branch in his hand and nodded. Yes, it's too obvious. However, because it's so obvious, it's in line with our idea. The nobles of the Britannia Empire would not explain too much to the soldiers. For the nobles, the soldiers were just chess pieces that could be discarded at any time. The only thing that could make the nobles take seriously was the pilot known as the Knight. Under such unspoken rules, these soldiers who had a map with them and clearly knew the intention of the battle made Ray Minkai, who captured and interrogated them, feel strange. Yes, the other party sent an invitation. It's like a night duel. Kai, will you go? Cornelia did not express her opinion, but asked instead. Go. Why wouldn't I go? It's rare that someone sent me an invitation to a night duel. How can I restrain myself from receiving such a warm invitation? Chinibu. When Ray Minkai's eyes lit up, the white cat, State Zero, who was lazily lying on the tree, glanced at Ray Minkai and slowly spat out a word that it had just learned. This is not Chinibu. State Zero. This is a night duel. Ray Minkai shouted with conviction. However, not to mention the white cat, even Cornelia, who was born in the royal family, could see that Ray Minkai, who kept saying that he wanted to have a night duel with the enemy, was actually secretly mocking the enemy. However, since the St. Raphael and St. Michael Knight Regiment have sent out a letter of challenge, should we accept it openly? Cornelia had a few plans in her mind, but in the end, it was still Ray Minkai and State Zero who carried it out. Openly, Ray Minkai glanced at State Zero, implying that he wanted the white cat to decide for itself. Meow? Perhaps because it had eaten too much, this little guy even learned to tilt its head and act cute. However, standing in front of it was Ray Minkai, who knew everything about State Zero, and Her Royal Highness, who was not interested in cute things. Don't act cute. If you have something to say, just say it. Ray Minkai flicked his finger, and a small branch was flicked towards a white cat. White cat raised its paw and swatted away the branch that Ray Minkai flicked at it. It whimpered twice. Cherry stone? You don't want to work without cherry stone. Ray Minkai stared at the white cat. Oh, I'm not interested. It's just a bunch of small toys. White cat muttered a few times, but still nodded. Forget it. If you want to make a scene, then make a scene. Then, White Cat's face darkened, and it looked up to the west. Kai, I can smell the rancid smell on them. Abyss. Lei Ming Lai was stunned and asked subconsciously. Maybe, or maybe not. This rancid smell is not as strong as the abyss. White Cat flicked its paw, shook its head, and lay back on the branch. Kai, will those monsters appear on the Europa continent like the Kyushu War? Although Cornelia did not quite understand what the abyss that Ray Minkai and White Cat were talking about was, the two encounters in Area 11 were still fresh in her memory. Well, maybe, but our current mission is to hold the Europa continent in our hands, and then have enough power to attack that person, the emperor who changed history. Well, let's go. For UFFI's dream. Roar. In the wilderness, the roar of the king of beasts resounded through the wilderness, wantonly declaring its existence. Under the lead of the golden warhorse, Vicingatorix, the Sunderland constantly emerged from all directions under the cover of the uneven hills around them. Like a tide, they launched an attack on the steel beast that they had surrounded with great difficulty. Everyone, follow the plan. Don't ever engage in close combat with this beast. Sitting in the cockpit of the golden warhorse Vicingatorix, Shin's face was calm, but also ferocious. His plan with Andre had succeeded. Under the shrinking of the big net, the steel beast was finally forced to the uneven hills. The overall terrain was concave. This was undoubtedly a good morale boost for the two knight regiments who had been tortured by the long-fanged lions Stansuro during this period of time. It also restored the morale of the two knight regiments that had slightly dropped. However, the prerequisite for the morale to rise again was to obliterate the steel beast that the soldiers privately called the Apocalypse Demonic Lion. Time's up. All cannons, prepare to fire. In addition, inform the Air Force to attack again. Yes, Farnese. After giving the order, Andre, who had returned to his seat, looked up and squinted his eyes at the distance. Under the leadership of the golden warhorse Vicingatorix, who was besieging the Long Fong Line Zero, the Sunderland. Why? Why didn't it transform into another form? Yes, since the Long Fong Line Zero fell into the trap created by Shin and Andre, it had been fighting against the two major knight corps in its white form, and there were no signs of it transforming like before. Roar. The Long Fong Lion Zero roared, and the laser claws in its hands repeatedly slammed towards the Sunderland that besieged it. Boom! Sunderland, who was slow to react, was undoubtedly killed by the Long Fong Lion. Boom! 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 The fast Sunderland dodged the laser claws of the Long Fong Lion Zero, but it couldn't dodge the two cannons hanging below the Long Fong Lion Zero's chest. Boom! 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 In the blink of an eye, the Sunderland soldiers who thought that they would be able to shoot at the Long Fong Lion from a safe distance fell into an even more dangerous situation in the blink of an eye. If they were close, the laser claws would explode. Once they were far away, the cannons would fire one after another, wantonly trampling on the battle plan that the Thunderlands had prepared beforehand, causing them to die with a grievance. Xia Yingking. The situation has changed. We can't use Plan A anymore. Strategist Shang Luo saw that the Sunderland that his subordinates were piloting had suffered heavy losses under the Fong Lion Type Zero's two-hit combo. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Yes, all troops retreat. The cannons are coming." Shin gritted his teeth slightly, but in the end, he didn't ride the golden warhorse Vicingatorix forward to compete with a Long Fong Lion Zero again. Oh, retreat? Kai, the Long Fong Lion Zero, the cannons are coming. Cornelia, who had been sitting in the back seat, saw the changes in the movements of the Sunderland and the golden warhorse, and immediately reminded Ray Minkai and the Long Fong Lion Zero. Understood. Ray Minkai and the Long Fong Lion Zero replied in unison. The Long Fong Lion Zero arched its body and sprinted forward. The plasma thrusters on its back lit up brightly. At the same time, the moment the Long Fong Lion Zero entered high-speed maneuver, the sound of cannons tearing through the sky was heard. Boom, boom, boom. The high explosive bombs weighing 5 tons turned into the most dazzling and bright existence in the world the moment the screeching sound reached its sharpest point. However, even this cannons that could wipe out dozens of nightmare did not cause much damage to the Longfong Lion Zero. Roar! The Longfong Lion Zero's figure was like an illusory butterfly, constantly shuttling back and forth in the vicinity of the high-explosive cannons. It didn't put the explosive power of the cannons in its eyes. It really is a monster. Xan, who had retreated to a certain distance, looked at the Longfong Lion Zero that was still able to perform freely under the bombardment of the railway cannons and sighed secretly. Immediately, he looked at his beautiful staff officer and said softly, "It seems that our monster won't give in so easily. Then, let's execute Plan B." Yes, Xiangge. Under Xian's command, the giant nets that were previously hidden in the depths of the hills were quickly pulled up by the cooperation of the Sunderland. In the blink of an eye, the Longfong Lion Zero's range of activity was encircled by the giant net, and it was constantly shrinking. At the same time, the cannons that tore through the sky continued to fall from the sky, smashing towards the Longfong Lion Zero. Hunting net? State 0. It seems like the other party has taken you for a real beast. Lei Mingkai glanced around and smiled. Humph. The Longfong Lion Zero did not answer Ray Mingkai's words, and only snorted coldly. Mingkai, Longfong Lion Zero. Be careful. There's something strange about this net. I'm afraid that there's a hidden trump card that can nullify the Longfong Lion's high mobility. Cornelia said as she looked up at the display above her head. If this drags on, the Air Force will be here. Roar! Under Cornelia's reminder, the Longfong Lion Zero's body swayed and rushed out tens of meters away. With a sharp momentum, it waved its laser claw towards the giant net. But the laser claw that had always been successful was not able to tear the giant net apart in the first moment. Instead, it was shocked by the amazing toughness of the giant net. The laser claw is ineffective. The Longfong Lion Zero was shocked and quickly retreated a few steps, letting out a low roar. Sure enough, something strange. Even a Longfong Lion Zero's laser claw could not tear it apart. Ray Mingkai, who did not believe in superstition, drove the Longfong Lion Zero back and forth in various directions to confirm this fact. The Air Force is here. At this time, Cornelia, who had been observing the sky, reminded softly. In the sky, there were hundreds of black dots that were rapidly growing in size. Aerial bombs. Whoa, boom, boom, boom. The bomber group appeared again. After being tortured by the Banza, a long-toothed lion last time, the remaining bomber group did not dare to descend too low. Instead, they dropped aerial bombs early on at the limit of the bombing height. They looked like they did not want to make any mistakes, but they did not want to make any mistakes. Roar. You can't even throw it accurately. You still want to bomb me. The Longfong Lion Zero roared at the bomber group high in the sky, but in the next moment, it was blown up by the bombs that exploded crazily beside it. Boom, boom, boom. The previous scene reappeared. However, this time, the bomber group would not lower their altitude at all. They would only drop bombs from high above. However, looking at the soil that was constantly being overturned under the bombs, Xian and Andre felt that Plan B might have succeeded. After all, under the giant net made of unknown materials, the steel behemoth with sharp claws could not tear it apart with its own claws. As a result, the Longfong Lion Zero lost its speed that it was proud of and let them bombard it to death. This was the strategy proposed by Xian, who witnessed the battle on the hill. However, was the reality really as he imagined? The answer was no. In the soil that was constantly being overturned by the explosion, a cold light bloomed, and the seemingly unbreakable giant net broke and floated back and forth in the explosion. Lightning appeared. The moment the orange lightning bloomed, a steel beast with 7 indestructible swords broke through the explosion and tore apart the giant net. It stood on the highest hill and let out a roar of a king descending. Roar! Chapter 210. The whistling aerial bombs fell like a rainstorm on the terrain that, strictly speaking, was not considered a hill. Under the violent bombardment, the terrain became further and further away from the word hill, completely losing the edge of a hill. Red, it turned red. Devil. They thought that the giant net that was successfully pulled up would be able to stop the steel beast that terrified the soldiers and finally be buried in the bombardment. However, the white steel beast actually repeated the strange thing that happened last time. Unknowingly, the white armor of the tusked lion type Zero was replaced with a strange armor that was different from the previous one. Sword. In addition, the white armor on the tusked lion Zero's body had turned into a ferocious armor that looked exceptionally bright red under the illumination of the flames of the explosion, and even more so, revealed a fierce aura. This was the reason why the soldiers who had just entered the attack position, according to the original plan, were scared out of their wits. Of course, although the scene of the giant tusk lion evolving into the giant tusk lion was shocking, it was not too terrifying. The reason why the soldiers were scared out of their wits was because of the previous rumors, as well as Rei Minkai's intention to release the captured soldiers. I saw a knight riding a red horse, wielding a war blade and wielding authority. He represented the chaos of war. After witnessing how easily the long-fanged Lionata tore apart the giant net that Nico and Andre claimed was forged from super-strong alloy, the soldiers' hands and feet trembled slightly, trembling as they spoke of the rumors that had spread through the entire Night Order during this period of time. Roar! When the giant tusk lion, wearing the ferocious armor, rushed out of the encirclement, it rushed towards the highest terrain nearby. Looking at its appearance, it seemed to want to settle the score with the bomber group. If this was the first time they fought with the giant tusk lion, the soldiers might think that the giant tusk lion's actions were ridiculous. However, it just so happened that these soldiers had participated in the cleanup of the battlefield during the previous pursuit on the hill. Therefore, while the soldiers rejoiced that the terrifying steel behemoth did not seek them out after breaking out of the encirclement, they were also worried about the future of the bomber group. Retreated? The bomber group retreated just like that? How is that possible? Shang Luo listened to the information from behind in surprise. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't believe that the bomber group that came to support this time had just thrown a bomb that didn't even amount to a basic number. When the steel behemoth showed that it wanted to shoot them down, they immediately turned around and left. Shang, there's no need to blame them. Although this steel beast is our crisis, the biggest problem is still the coalition led by Lang Lanshi. Compared to the surprised Shang Luo, Xion's attitude was much more relaxed. He knew that it was impossible for Augusta to use all his resources to destroy this steel behemoth. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given limited support to the two knight regiments of Saint Raphael and Saint Michael while retaining most of the strength of the other knight regiments. Yes, Xianga. Then, I'm afraid that what's in front of us is Plan C. When all the cards were revealed, Shang Luo found that the situation still came to a situation she didn't want to see. Combat battle. Gather all the knight regiments of the two major knight regiments to surround this steel behemoth from all directions and kill this steel behemoth with close combat. Kai. The bombing stopped. In addition, there are no signs of shelling anymore. After going back and forth in the cockpit of a long-fanged Lion Zero for a while, Cornelia also gradually adapted to the layout of the cockpit of the long-fanged Lion Zero. At the moment, she was using the auxiliary computer in the rear cockpit to monitor the current battlefield environment of the long-fanged Lion Zero. It seems that our enemy has begun to reveal their cards. Rei Minkai nodded, but the movements of his hands did not stop because of this. After discovering the departure of the bomber group, the long-fanged Lion Schneider suddenly turned around, and in a condescending posture, suddenly accelerated and rushed towards Sunderland below. Sunderland, who was targeted by the long-fanged Lion Schneider, naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for its death. At the same time it accelerated and retreated, it raised the machine gun in its hands and continuously attacked the long-fanged Lion Schneider's head, and even its eyes that were protected by the armor. However, Under normal circumstances, this would definitely be a ruthless attack, but under the long-fanged Lion Schneider's sturdy armor, it met with failure. Roar! With a low roar, the long-fanged Lion Schneider's 5 sharp blades in the blink of an eye turned from the back of its head to the front of its forehead and flashed a burst of cold light towards the pitiful Sunderland. Da-da-da-da! The machine gun in Sunderland's hands was still roaring, but the long-fanged Lion Schneider, who completely ignored the roar, used the 5 sharp blades in its head to smash the pitiful Sunderland into pieces. The mechanical hand, mechanical arm, guide wheel, machine gun, head camera, and the cockpit that should have ejected the pilot at the first moment were all cut open by the long-fanged Lion Schneider's blades, turning into wreckage that filled the sky and fell onto the smoky ground. Boom! The moment Sunderland exploded, a golden figure suddenly rushed out from the left side of the long-fanged Lion Schneider. It was Vercingetorix. Roar! It turned out that Vercingetorix, who was driving the Golden Warhorse, saw the opportunity, and while the long-fanged Lion Schneider scattered the unlucky Sunderland, he suddenly accelerated and rushed out from the side, attempting to swing the strange long weapon in his hands that was made up of more than 10 large and small gears to cut the long-fanged Lion Schneider in half. However, XN, who was busy with his calculations, did not immediately realize the true purpose of the pair of blades at the waist of the long-fanged Lion Schneider. When Vercingetorix's strange gear weapon was about to chop down, the long-fanged Lion Schneider immediately moved the blade at the left side of its waist down and just happened to block the front of the strange gear weapon. Keek wong, 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 woo. At this moment, Xian once again experienced the feeling of being suppressed by the long-fanged Lion Schneider with absolute strength. Even if he had already activated the strange gear weapon in the Golden Warhorse Schneider's hands to the maximum power, but in the midst of the sparks, the blade that blocked the Golden Warhorse's attack did not move at all, and did not show any signs of being broken by the strange gear weapon. At the same time, the long-fanged Lion Schneider did not stop because of the Golden Warhorse's surprise attack, and stayed in place to be surrounded by the Sunderland that rushed out from all directions. Therefore, under the absolute strength of the long-fanged Lion Schneider, the Golden Warhorse Schneider was actually forced to retreat in the opposite direction. For deeper marks appeared under Schneider's feet as Schneider retreated. At the same time, the Golden Warhorse Schneider's 4 limbs began to show signs of not being able to withstand the power of the long-fanged Lion Schneider, and constantly gave out warnings that it was about to be damaged. Can't hold on any longer? Exen secretly gritted his teeth, and a trace of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Xia Yingiking. Hold on. At this moment, the staff officer Schneider appeared just in time. Boom, boom, boom. A wave of grenades whistled through the air, and a series of violent explosions hit the long-fanged Lion Schneider one after another. Although this did not have any effect on the long-fanged Lion Schneider, it was enough to allow the Golden Warhorse Schneider to escape from the blade of the long-fanged Lion Schneider. Xia Yingiking, are you okay? Schneider asked worriedly. Yes, I'm okay. Xian nodded. Beside the retreating Golden Warhorse Vercingetorix, several Sunderland warhorses with hooks attached to their arms swiftly charged out. In a formation of 1 Sunderland warhorse and 2 Sunderland warhorses, they dispersed and charged towards the long-toothed Lion Schneider. Your Highness, is there a weapon in the Britannia army that can hunt wild beasts? Lei Mingyin's eyes were constantly refreshed with the images of the Sunderland with hooked weapons. No, I've never heard of the Britannia army needing to hunt wild beasts. Cornelia shook her head slightly, but she still reminded him, Kai, be careful. I'm afraid that these weapons are specially made to deal with the long-fanged Lion Schneider. Yes, I know. Perhaps I've already guessed the usage of these weapons. Hooks, huge wild beasts, and the armor that made the nightmare helpless. Under the superposition of these factors, there should not be many methods that people could think of. Using long-distance bombing, aerial bombing, and other methods to kill the long-fanged Lion Schneider was one method, but it had already failed. In the Nightmare's armory, other than the machine gun, there were only howitzers and rocket launchers left. These are the most lethal conventional weapons. As for the radiant vibrating sword, Sunderland could not use it. Therefore, the ultimate use of these hooks was probably electrotherapy, right? These weapons really make people unhappy. Speaking of electrotherapy, Ray Minkai subconsciously recalled a game memory that was difficult to recall. Schneider, run. Don't get hooked by those hooks. Roar. The long-fanged lion Nita let out a loud roar. His speed did not decrease, but instead increased. The pair of swords at his waist extended out horizontally. As he moved at high speed, he took the initiative and surrounded Sunderland, who was supposed to be moving around Nita, and moved around them. Schneider! 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 Clang! In just a few minutes, those Sunderland with hooks not only did not make any contributions, but also allowed the original plan to succeed. Instead, they were smashed into two by the long-fanged lion Schneider, who turned the tables. At this moment, Shang Ro, who had witnessed all of this, could hardly think of any strategy. At this moment, Shang Ro could only realize that the disparity in strength between the two sides was so great that it could no longer be described with words. Facing this steel beast that could change its armor at any time without any warning to deal with the battlefield environment, Shang Ro realized that all of his strategies were useless. Shang, are you afraid? Xian's voice suddenly sounded. No, I'm not. Shang Ro's voice was weak and empty, but soon, when he answered next, Shang Ro's voice became strong. No, Xia Yingking, our knight regiment can still continue to fight, even if the enemy is a real demon. Dang. Suddenly, a soft sound attracted everyone's attention. It turned out that a small Sunderland team had disregarded their own safety and fought to the death. A Sunderland that had been waiting for a long time successfully hit the long-fanged lion Shunada with its hook and firmly hung it in the groove of the lion's armor. Success! Quick, start the power. Shang Ro's voice was filled with surprise. Schneider! In the next second, a fierce electric current suddenly rushed along the steel chain to the long-fanged lion Schneider's body. Roar! In an instant, the steel beast that was still using absolute strength to play with the two-knight regiment let out a painful roar. Its movements even staggered and directly fell to the ground. Seeing this, the remaining Sunderland around immediately shot out their hooks and hooked the long-fanged lion Schneider on the ground. Then, they used full power to increase the output to the maximum. Roar! At this moment, in everyone's eyes, the long-fanged lion Schneider let out a painful roar. When the fierce electric current was sent to the long-fanged lion Schneider's body, it could be seen with the naked eye jumping back and forth on the long-fanged lion Schneider's body. Just like what the owner of the electric current thought, it crazily wreaked havoc on this steel beast that brought them terrifying memories. Roar! The beast's painful roar sounded again and again. That terrifying body seemed to have lost all its strength. No matter how many times it struggled, in the end, under the devastating high-voltage electric current, it powerlessly fell to the ground. Did it succeed? Shang Ro, who had just made a bold statement and was prepared to die for his country, looked in disbelief at the terrifying steel beast that had actually fallen in such an unexpected way. Perhaps this is an expected and unexpected result. Xian's hands moved, just as he was about to give the order to capture the long-fanged lion Schneider. A cold aura that caused Xian to tremble uncontrollably suddenly appeared. Not good. Shang, quickly retreat. Roar! All of a sudden, a roar that was even louder and more majestic than the previous one exploded in everyone's ears. Everyone's ears buzzed from the roar, and they could no longer hear anything else. What was strange was that within this roar, Shang Ro actually heard a trace of comfort. Right? That's right. This wasn't a cry of pain. Instead, it was a roar that came from extreme comfort. At this moment, an unfamiliar voice rang out. Humans, the taste isn't bad. Also, thank you for your hospitality. This is a return gift for you. Take it. Just as the voice fell, an untouchable, unseen, but faintly felt energy swept over. Wong. After a low buzzing sound, all of the nightmare participating in this battle, even the mothership at the back, fell into darkness. Chapter 211. EMP. This name was abbreviated from the English word electromagnetic pulse. It was the electromagnetic pulse that most military fans were familiar with. It was a physical phenomenon. Specifically, it was the electromagnetic radiation produced by nuclear explosions, lightning, sunspots, and other conditions that most people were familiar with. It was used to destroy the enemy's electronic equipment. Of course, the above was not all about EMP, but it was enough to summarize what was happening in front of them. What's going on? Cornelia blinked her eyes and looked a little puzzled. When she was hooked by the Sunderland's hook, Cornelia's heart was undoubtedly nervous. However, in the subsequent development, Cornelia realized that the Sunderland's painstaking effort and sacrifice to hook the Twin Fong Line Zero could not hurt the Twin Fong Line Zero, and even Ray Minkai and Cornelia herself. Even though Cornelia could see that the Twin Fong Line Zero was being attacked by the Sunderland's high-voltage electric current through the screen on both sides, in reality, she was fine sitting in the Twin Fong Line Zero's cockpit, and Ray Minkai was fine too. Even though the Twin Fong Line Zero was howling in pain, Cornelia could not understand how the Twin Fong Line Zero could be unharmed under the high-voltage electric current attack. It even had the mood to pretend that it was injured to deceive the Sunderland around it. EMP, electromagnetic pulse attack. This is a trick that the Twin Fong Line Zero came up with. Ray Minkai, who was sitting in front, explained to Cornelia without turning his head. Even though the world of Lu Lucio used cherry stone energy as its main energy source, there were probably people who knew about the existence of EMP, the electromagnetic pulse, right? Of course, Cornelia, who was sitting behind him, should not be one of the people who knew about the existence of EMP. If it was Royd, he might know about it. EMP. Was it caused by the Twin Fong Line Zero? Cornelia's eyes widened slightly. Yes, it's this guy who's messing around. After processing the high-voltage electric current released by the Sunderland, it suddenly exploded and formed an EMP storm that destroyed all the Sunderland soldiers on the battlefield, including their motherships. Ray Minkai shrugged and said helplessly. To be honest, Ray Minkai did not know that State Zero was messing around. But even so, Ray Minkai didn't think it was a big deal. Looking at the Sunderland that was scattered all over the ground, as well as the mothership that had already fallen silent in the distance, Ray Minkai felt that. What a profit. He had struck it rich. Originally, Ray Minkai thought that he would have to go through a tough battle to get rid of the two night regiments. He never thought that the EMP attack that the White Cat Twin Fong Line Zero would be so effective. But then again, even if the existence of the EMP phenomenon was discovered, it had not been put into practice. Even if the Sunderland and the Golden Warhorse Visingetorix were the most advanced mecha in the Britannia Empire, they were still unable to resist the EMP attack. The mecha that fell all over the ground under the EMP attack of the Twin Fong Line Zero was an unquestionable proof. Let's go. Your Highness, our goal should have been achieved. Although there were some accidents, Ray Minkai knew that his and Cornelia's plan from the beginning was to delay the two night regiments and find an opportunity to destroy the two night regiments. The plan was completed under such a comical and unexpected situation. And it's time to go back. I'm afraid that UFFI's side has been targeted by the Emperor. Cornelia retracted her gaze and no longer paid attention to the mecha that had lost its power. Its system had been shut down, and even its escape mechanism had failed, turning it into an iron coffin. She said in a deep voice, "Yes." Ray Minkai knew. Cornelia knew all about it. Who were the people they cared about? Where was their weakness? Therefore, at the moment when the two night regiments were eliminated, the Twin Fong Lion Sunderland's body flashed, and the orange-red ferocious armor instantly turned into a sky-blue armor. Under the propulsion of the plasma engine, it quickly left the corpse-strewn battlefield. Go! G-A! Bang! With the help of many crowbars, the cockpit of the Golden Warhorse Visingetorix was finally pried open. Xiainga, are you okay? The moment the cockpit was opened, Shang Law, who had gathered a large number of people to come to the rescue, was worried. No, I'm fine. Sitting calmly in the cockpit, he was not frightened by the sudden darkness when all the components and systems of the Golden Warhorse Visingatorix were burned by the EMP. Xin just shook his head faintly, which could be considered as answering his staff officer's words. Then, he stood up and looked at the battlefield that was corpse-strewn, as well as the mothership that had lost its movement and was like an eternal stone. We lost. The Knight Regiment that we are proud of, the San Rafael Knight Regiment, actually lost without being able to fight back. Shang, do you think this is normal? Although Xion's expression was calm, there was something surging in his eyes. Shang Law chose to be silent, which was rare for him. Xion didn't pursue why Shang Luo didn't answer his question. Or rather, he never expected Shang Luo to give him a satisfactory answer. If you lose, it means you die. Hesitation means defeat. With the help of the rescue personnel, Shin quietly watched the subordinates climb out of the dead Nightmare's cockpit. Shin suddenly said something that Shang Lo didn't quite understand. Victory! In General Xion's office, Zero slapped the report in his hand on General Xion's desk. Xion frowned, picked up the report that Zero slapped on the desk, and read it carefully. However, he didn't read for long before he stood up in surprise and looked at the mask on Zero's face with disbelief. Sir Zero, is this true? Uh-huh. It's true. General Xion. Of the 4 Holy Knight Orders in front of us, only 2 were left. The San Rafael and St. Michael Knight regiments were destroyed by a mysterious steel behemoth of unknown origin. Zero nodded and said calmly. However, Jean could hear a hint of excitement in his voice. It seems that it's time for our counterattack. Xion took a deep breath, sat back on the leather chair, and sighed deeply. Yes, counterattack, but before that, we may have some things to deal with. Otherwise, in front of the triumphant return of the knight riding the beast, I'm afraid we don't have the qualifications to make him contribute to our strategy. Zero paused and said slowly in a serious tone, if General Zon's dream is still there, then the power of this behemoth, the power of this knight, and even the power of the princess are necessary. Zero's words were undoubtedly full of temptation, but Xion shook his head without changing his expression. Let's stop here. That's it for today. Sir Zero, we have to prepare more things to be able to cope with the upcoming changes. Is that so? Then, I'll take my leave. Other than Xion and Zero, no one else knew about this little episode that happened in General Xion's office. Not to mention Euphemia, who was far away in White Wolf Fort. In the previous rescue operation, Euphemia, who successfully rescued everyone in Department Q, arranged for everyone including Royd, Cecil, and Veretta New to stay in White Wolf Fort with Zero's help. Euphemia, who was originally worried that Royd, Cecil, Veretta, and the others would not get along with the people of White Wolf Fort led by Layla, knew that her worries were unnecessary when she saw Royd and Cecil chatting with Anna, who developed Alexander on her own. Your Highness, you can put down your worries. Before you came back, we've already spent some time with Sir Royd and Madame Veretta, so we can be considered friends. Layla stood beside Euphemia and smiled. Yes, it seems that I worried too much. It saved me a lot of trouble that everyone can get along. While the 2 women were talking, Sarah Dines, who was on duty, suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Sarah, what happened? Layla, who thought that something special happened to Sarah, narrowed her eyes and immediately stopped talking with Euphemia. She ran to Sarah and asked, No, Commander. It's good news. That knight has entered the border of our Langlan Shi kingdom and is returning to our White Wolf Fort under the escort of the armed helicopter sent by General Xion. As soon as Sarah finished speaking, a figure suddenly appeared beside her. Kai, are you back already? Where's Royal Sister? Euphemia asked quickly. Although Euphemia had a conversation with Cornelia after she woke up, Euphemia still felt uneasy before she really saw the royal sister she admired. Yes, Your Highness, Her Highness Cornelia, is also by the knight's side. After 12 hours, they will enter the range of the White Wolf Fort. Sarah nodded and explained as she opened the news from Xeon. I got it. Thank you very much for your help. Sarah. Euphemia nodded, but when she raised her head, Layla saw a solemn face. This was completely different from the joyful face that should be revealed when she was about to reunite with her family. Your Highness, what did you think of? Layla's heart jumped inexplicably, and she seemed to have noticed something wrong. No, maybe not. Euphemia shook her head, looked around, and found that Zero was not here. Her Excellency Zero went to the capital to discuss the current situation with General Xian. Layla solved the doubts in Euphemia's heart. Her Excellency left? And Kai is coming back too. But there's still something wrong? Euphemia pondered for a moment, and her body trembled. She had already noticed where the wrong thing came from. Layla, can you raise the alert level of the White Wolf Fort to the highest? Your Highness, what did you notice? Layla was stunned and asked back. The enemy didn't attack. This is very strange. Layla, you have to know that I'm now semi-openly in Langlanshi Nation, and I personally drove the body to rescue Department Q. Euphemia voiced out her considerations one by one. Also, when Department Q was rescued by us, Kai also used Apollo's carriage to successfully launch a surprise attack and rescue Royal Sister. But, Knight, didn't His Excellency Ray Minkai already kill the 2 knight regiments that were chasing them? Layla already had a vague image in her mind, but it was still a step away. Yes, that's the strange thing. Layla, if His Majesty the Emperor really wants to execute Royal Sister and me, the 3rd princess, don't you think that Kai's power is too weak to kill Royal Sister? Yes, although he used the power of 2 knight regiments, judging from the power that His Excellency the Knight showed, it's not a difficult thing. In other words, His Majesty the Emperor's target is not Her Highness Cornelia, but, while thinking, Layla's eyes met with Euphemia's eyes. In an instant, the two exclaimed in unison, White Wolf Fort! Boom! In the next instant, a wave of violent tremors shook the entire White Wolf Fort. Sarah, quick, see what happened. Also, recall everyone to their posts. Let Team Zero prepare to attack. Layla made a prompt decision and asked Sarah to inform everyone to return to their combat posts. They're here. Layla, it's them. The troops sent by His Majesty the Emperor. Euphemia's face gradually turned cold. What? This is near the capital of Langlan Shi Nation. How did the enemy infiltrate in? Moreover, according to this scale, this has already exceeded the movement that ordinary special forces can cause. Layla shook her head and quickly refuted Euphemia's words, but the big screen in the command center slapped Layla's little face back and forth in the next second. In the scene, a figure painted in blue, white, and gold swiftly circled back and forth in the sky. Moreover, as it circled, it ceaselessly launched attacks at the White Wolf Fort below. Moreover, on the other side, in the tall and deep forest that surrounded the White Wolf Fort, numerous blazing light beams erupted and launched a fierce attack toward the 20-meter-tall silver egg that was parked beside the White Wolf Fort. Sarah, raise the shield wall. At the same time, send out a distress signal and let everyone attack. After giving the order, Layla turned to look at Euphemia and revealed a face that brooked no refusal. Your Highness, before the identity and number of the attackers are clear, I hope you can stay here. I'm afraid the enemy's target is you, Your Highness. Euphemia nodded and replied, Yes. I know. Since the enemy went through so much trouble to come here, they won't give up easily. Layla, I'm afraid we'll all be busy after this. Chapter 212. Under Layla's command, Alisanda, who was crawling rapidly on the ground like an arthropod, quickly rushed out from an underground exit hidden somewhere in the forest. He used his fastest speed to find the mech hidden in the forest that could threaten the White Wolf Fort. The blue, white, and gold-painted machine hovering in the air was dealt with by the defense system of White Wolf Fortress itself. As the base of the Zero Force, White Wolf Fortress was naturally repaired and equipped with a lot of defense equipment. The turrets that were constantly rising from every corner of White Wolf Fortress and the shield wall that was almost the same height as White Wolf Fortress were representative. Boom! Boom! In less than a few minutes after the Zero Force led by Hugo Archimedes rushed out of the underground passage, they had found the machine hidden in the forest. The nightmare driven by the Ninth Knight, Nanette Aniagalam, a round-table knight from the Britannia Empire. What? It's actually a round-table knight. But when Archimedes passed this discovery back to the command center, Layla stood up in surprise, then looked back at Euphemia, who was calm and did not seem to be frightened by Archimedes' discovery. Your Highness, is it really a round-table knight? It's impossible for an ordinary pilot to pass through the defense line of Langlon West Country. Also, do you think that the rats hiding in the Europa Alliance would let in a bunch of insignificant soldiers? Euphemia's eyes flashed with light. So, the mutable nightmare hovering in the air is also a part of the round-table knight. As soon as Layla spoke, she immediately recalled a piece of information about the Knight of the Round Table. The third knight, Kino Bienbrook. I remember that the nightmare he drives seems to be a mutable machine. Yes, the third knight, Kino Bienbrook, and the ninth knight, Nanette Aniagalam. They should be the forces sent by His Majesty the Emperor to kill me. Euphemia nodded, her voice calm as she told the terrible truth. After that, she shook her head and added, "Don't worry about it. I believe that this is not all of the forces that the Emperor sent. Layla, if it was you, how many forces would you dispatch to attack White Wolf Fort?" Layla was stunned and then subconsciously muttered to herself. As a commander of Zero and the commander of White Wolf Fort, Layla was naturally familiar with everything here. She had even contributed to the defense system of White Wolf Fort. Therefore, with Euphemia's reminder, various plans appeared in Layla's mind. This is a feint. The real killer move is the person, not the nightmare. Layla shuddered and was immediately frightened by her own guess. If the enemy's actions were as she expected, then it was possible that they had already snuck into this place from a place that was difficult for White Wolf Fort to detect. Your Highness, please don't leave here. Even if White Wolf Fort has been infiltrated, this place is still capable of protecting your safety. Layla didn't have time to think about it. After ensuring Euphemia's safety, she connected the communication with the guards. However, no matter how Layla tried to contact them, the guards who would answer all her questions in the past had lost contact. Even the guard captain, Oscar Hamill, who was at odds with Layla and the others on the surface, but was actually quite supportive of Layla, and the others had also lost contact. The guards have fallen. Layla's hands didn't have time to tremble before they were clenched tightly. She raised her head and shouted, "Level 1 situation. Activate all the protective measures in the command center. Also, activate the backup energy and backup communication lines. Everything is to ensure that the battle is of the highest priority." Yes. Following Layla's order, the atmosphere in the command center became solemn and oppressive. However, no one spoke and just did what they were doing silently. Layla, let me out. In this castle, the guards aren't the only ones who can protect this castle. We have another force. Your Highness. You mean Department Q and the others? No. No matter how well-trained Department Q was, the entire department had yet to recover. Under such circumstances, how can we let them fight against the enemies who sneaked in a White Wolf Fort? However, Layla's rebuttal didn't get Euphemia's approval. Instead, it was met with Veretta's rebuttal. A purple harrow jumped out from among the harrows that usually circled Euphemia quietly. When a holographic image formed by a beam of light appeared, Valletta said, "Let's go to the Harrow Tower." Commander Layla, thank you very much for your concern for us. However, based on the current situation, we might be the people who can handle the current situation the best in this White Wolf Fort. Because the people who sneaked into White Wolf Fort this time aren't ordinary special forces. They're direct troops from the dark side of the Britannia Empire, a force that should be controlled by the 98th Emperor, Charles d'I Britannia. The Emperor's direct troops? How can that be? Layla was stunned, but quickly agreed to Veretta's request. After all, she didn't know anything about the intruder and had lost the protection of the guards. Letting Veretta and the others attack was the only and best choice at the moment. Your Highness, I'll let Department Q and the others attack, but you should stay here. In the end, Layla still didn't give up and dissuaded Euphemia from leaving the command center. No, Layla, this is my personal decision. It has nothing to do with you and Veretta. Moreover, even if Veretta and the others find the intruder's real body, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to deal with them. What Layla didn't expect was that Euphemia's attitude was so firm that everyone present could hear the determination in Euphemia's voice that couldn't be refused. Looking at the stubbornness in Layla's eyes, Euphemia waved her hand lightly. The red Euphemia that was spinning around Layla's feet rolled forward, and a light screen separated Layla and Euphemia. This is F***CK? Sir. Now the third knight and ninth knight have restrained those nightmare named Alexander. At the same time that a respectful baritone voice sounded out from the earpiece, a thin figure walked out from an abandoned pit and stepped onto the land that belonged to White Wolf Fort. And is that so? Where are the guards here? Are they all settled? The thin figure was a young man who looked to be only 15 or 16 years old and was 168 centimeters tall. He pressed the headset in his ear and asked casually, "Our infiltration was very successful. However, the enemy's guard captain was injured and escaped." There was a hint of fear in his voice, as if he was afraid that the young man would give the order to send him to his death if he didn't agree with him. This made the baritone fearful. Is that so? Did he escape? Haha, let him go then. After all, you're just mortals. If it weren't for the limitation of my physical strength, I'm afraid I wouldn't need you to open a path for me. A mocking smile appeared on the young man's lips. Yes, no one would have thought that sending two of the Empire's strongest knights of the Round Table and His Majesty's direct special forces was just a cover for him. The young man raised his head and looked at White Wolf Fort that had already covered the sun and left a shadow. The mocking smile on the corner of his mouth deepened. Haha, it's probably just another boring game. His Majesty is too cautious. Then, the young man walked forward with light footsteps, following the path paved by the special forces. However, before he took a few steps, the baritone who reported the situation to him earlier suddenly sounded in the headset again. Luo, Lord Luo, please be careful. The guards of White Wolf Fort haven't been defeated by us. Right now, our movements are obstructed. Obstructed? Were they attacked? Is it the military force gathered by that officer that ran away earlier? The young man raised his eyebrows slightly. Although he felt slightly surprised, he didn't take it to heart. No, it's not an officer. It's another group of people. They seem to be very familiar with our tactics. In a single move, we lost quite a few people. Familiar with our existence? The young man stopped. It's them. Ha! You didn't expect that just after being rescued, you would immediately throw yourself in a battle? In the end, we're all just pawns in someone's hands. Then, as pawns, I'll send you off properly. The young man smiled slightly and said softly, "Hold on. I'll be there right away." "Yes, me lord." Da-da-da-da-da. In the corridor, when a series of sharp whistling sounds were heard from the scattered bullets, holes of varying depths were blasted out on the walls and floor. Veretta's right hand held onto an assault rifle that was specially designed for street battles, and after her left hand made a few gestures behind her, she took out a grenade from her waist and pulled out the pin. After silently counting to 3, she immediately did the same with her subordinates and threw the grenade into the depths of the corridor. Ding, 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 ding. The instant the grenade landed on the ground, Veretta seemed to have heard the shouts of the enemies hurriedly dodging, and also the muffled sound of heavy bodies falling onto the ground. After that, a series of explosions sounded out. The shrapnel that was blasted out from the inside of the grenade instantly flew out in all directions, deeply piercing into the walls, and also piercing into the flesh of the enemies that were unable to dodge in time. Attack! Quickly! The moment the explosion sounded out, Veretta's gaze turned cold, and she shouted out delicately. She took the lead and rushed out from behind the bunker, shooting towards the direction of the enemies repeatedly. Da-da-da-da. The cooperation between Veretta and her subordinates was undoubtedly tacit and also abnormally efficient. After discovering that her enemies were special forces that she was familiar with, Veretta immediately adopted a targeted tactic, and the result was clear at a glance. My lord, the enemies here have already been eliminated by us. At the same time that the sound of gunshots sounded out, her subordinates reported the current situation. Let's continue to the next location. Also, we have to be a bit more careful. I'm afraid that this attack will provoke that group of monsters. Veretta turned her head and took a glance at her subordinates who were currently shooting at the enemies, and with a calm expression, she gave the order. It's not that Veretta didn't want to leave anyone alive, but she was very clear about her enemies. The people that were sent to assassinate Euphemia right now wouldn't say anything that they knew, and the only ones that would be left behind were the dead people that would bring them into the coffin. Veretta's approach was cautious. However, just as they reached the next corner, Veretta's footsteps suddenly stopped, and she even stopped her subordinates who were running behind her. Quiet. Veretta's eyes were full of seriousness. It's them, those lunatics. Although Veretta didn't say much, it was enough to make her subordinates' hearts skip a beat, and they subconsciously clenched the handles of the assault rifles in their hands. Oh, have we been discovered? Do you want to come out? Hide and seek isn't a fun thing to do. Veretta's movements were fast, but she was already discovered by the enemies. Veretta didn't respond, but she secretly waved her hand, signaling her subordinates to open the grenade and give it to her. With a heavy and cold grenade in her hand, Veretta's eyes flashed with determination. Then, as she threw her right hand toward the corridor, she shouted, "Let's go!" Boom! Veretta and the others had just taken a few steps when the grenade exploded. Fortunately, the grenade exploded at the corner, so Veretta and the others didn't suffer any injuries, but they were still covered in dust. However, they didn't have time to care about their own dusty faces. Instead, they looked at the open space in front of them with vigilance and the young man who was standing there peacefully. Looking at the clean and relaxed young man, Veretta and her subordinates' eyes flashed with a trace of fear. "Aren't you going to play hide and seek?" All of a sudden, he threw a grenade at him. "If I didn't run fast enough, I'm afraid I would have died," the young man said with a smile. For ordinary people, the scene just now was a test of life and death. Veretta looked at the young man, gritted her teeth, and pulled the trigger. Da-da-da! Gunshots rang out. The gunshots fell. The young man's appearance was still neat and tidy, but at some point in time, his position had changed from standing not far in front of Veretta to standing on the left side of Veretta. That was where he could dodge Veretta's shot. It's very dangerous to shoot at people. As soon as she finished speaking, Veretta's vision blurred, and she found that the young man was already standing in front of her. In his hand, there was a dagger that was deeply embedded in Veretta's heart. "You!" Veretta couldn't believe her eyes, and even more so, she couldn't believe the scene in front of her. As a warrior, she didn't even know when she had been stabbed with a dagger. "Big sister, I'm sorry. This is a mission." The smile on the young man's face remained. Then, after his figure disappeared again, Veretta heard the muffled sounds of her subordinates falling to the ground one after another. "Monster, monster! Monster of the church!" Veretta's body swayed, and she fell backward weakly. However, what greeted her was not the cold floor, but a warm and soft embrace. "Veretta, thank you for your hard work. Rest for a while. Don't worry. You'll be fine. Your Highness Euphemia, hurry, hurry." Before Veretta could finish her words, she fell into infinite darkness. The person who saved Veretta was Euphemia, who had rushed over from the command center after convincing Layla. At this moment, Euphemia felt that her decision was so well prepared. If she still stayed in the command center, Veretta and everyone in Department Q would probably be sacrificed. At that time, Euphemia wouldn't know what kind of expression she should use to welcome Ray Minkai. After Euphemia gently placed Veretta, who was unconscious but had been injected with the healing nanosolvent, on the ground. She raised her head and looked at the young man who had almost destroyed the entire department queue with a raise of his hand. Rollo, that's your name, right? Her Royal Highness stood upright in front of Veretta and everyone in Department Q, using herself as their shield to protect Veretta and everyone in Department Q. Oh, your Royal Highness, do you know my name? The young man was slightly stunned, as if he was surprised that the princess in front of him knew his name. No, it's just that my knight told me about your existence. Before this, I knew nothing about you and your existence. Euphemia raised her right hand, and the harrow that always surrounded Euphemia occupied the position around Euphemia. Knight? Is it that knight named Ray Minkai? He looks like His Majesty was right. Your Royal Highness has already fallen in love with your knight. The young man smiled gently, as if he was a shy young man who had made a promise. Don't worry, your Royal Highness. Your knight will reunite with you in a while. Who knew? Euphemia smiled lightly. No, I'll wait here. I will wait for him here, for my knight to return. In the next second, Euphemia's vision blurred. The young man who was standing a few meters away suddenly appeared in front of Euphemia in an instant, and in his hand was the dagger that almost killed Veretta. However, what was different from what happened to Veretta was that this dagger was blocked by a faintly discernible force field. A force field. This is a gift from the Ministry of Justice's doctor. I didn't expect Rollo to be the first to experience it personally. Before she could finish, the young man's figure teleported again, and he appeared a few meters away from Euphemia. The dagger in his hand was replaced by the assault rifle that Veretta and the others used. Da-da-da-da. Dang, 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 dang. Bullets whistled, and sparks flew. The faintly discernible force field in front of Euphemia was still firm. TSK. Realizing that something was wrong, the young man gritted his teeth. Just as Euphemia moved her lips and was about to speak, he once again teleported to Euphemia's left. On her right side, even from behind, he launched continuous attacks. Regardless of whether it was a dagger, a gun, or even a grenade, they were all useless. The force field that was blocking him from completing his mission was still extremely sturdy. What's going on? My geas is ineffective. The young man still refused to believe it and wanted to use his power again, but he forgot that he had overused his geas and fainted in the blink of an eye. Experience, sir. The moment the young man collapsed, Euphemia finally finished what she wanted to say. However, her only audience also collapsed due to overexertion of power. Is this the power of geas that Kai was talking about? How strange. Euphemia recalled the memory fragments she had just now. She couldn't find any memories related to why the young man collapsed. If it weren't for the fact that the Herods gifted to her by the Ministry of Justice were equipped with E-force fields, and Lame Minkai had taken precautions and informed Euphemia of Rollo's information in advance, Euphemia might have fallen into a trap today and fallen into danger. Little Purple, Little Red, stay here and protect everyone. Also, inform Layla to send someone to bring Rollo back. Before Kai returns, Little Purple and Little Red, you two must keep a close eye on Rollo. Don't let him do anything bad. The other hero, follow me. It's time to meet our knight of the round table. Hero, meet. Hero, meet. Chapter 213. Da-da-da-da. The sky above the White Wolf Fort was filled with cannonballs fired by the anti-aircraft cannons. In this barrage that almost sealed off the entire sky, the blue, white, and gold nightmare, which was painted in blue, white, and gold and looked somewhat like a fighter jet, nimbly shuttled through the barrage that was a death sentence for normal. No, even for elite pilots. All of a sudden, the blue, white, gold nightmare that was shuttling through the barrage and looking for a chance to break through suddenly raised its nose and accelerated away from the barrage. It pulled up to a higher altitude and avoided the firing height of the anti-aircraft cannons on the White Wolf Fort. Layla, who was in the command center, couldn't help but feel her heart skip a beat at this strange scene. However, before she could think of a worse situation, she received an email from Harrow. What? The enemy that infiltrated the White Wolf fort has been eliminated? Layla looked at the several photos in the email and was stunned. She seemed to feel that everything that happened in front of her was an illusion. However, if the content of this email was true, then the nightmare that was hovering above the White Wolf fort was most likely preparing to retreat. Sarah directly used the broadcast to gather the surviving guards and asked them to gather at this location to take care of the captives and injured. Yes, after Layla arranged the orders one by one, her gaze naturally gathered on the forest displayed on the big screen. If the flying nightmare was preparing to escape, then the Knight of the Round Table who was fighting with Akeem and the others would definitely retreat immediately. Maybe I can capture the Knight of the Round Table. Suddenly, an idea that she had never had before appeared in Layla's mind. Sarah, can you contact Her Highness the Princess? Her Highness the Princess? I'll try. On the other side, Euphemia, who had subdued, Rollo walked out of the White Wolf fort under the escort of the remaining 3 Harrow and arrived at the flat ground where the pirate Gouda was parked. Bang! All of a sudden, a gunshot was heard. Clang! In the next second, the sound of a metal object colliding with the E-force field followed closely. Sniper? Euphemia frowned. She lowered her head to look at the bullet that had fallen from the E-force field. The bullet had been flattened by half, but it was still rolling. Harrow, let's go. Euphemia didn't care about the sniper hiding in the dark. Although the E-force field couldn't be compared to the GN force field, it was enough to withstand the attack of any single weapon. Even under overload, it could still withstand the attack of a large caliber cannon for a period of time. This was also one of the reasons why Sher Hui of the Ministry of Justice had insisted on giving her Harrow to Euphemia. As a princess who had her sights set on the throne, the dangers that Euphemia would encounter in the future would not be limited to these. Bang! 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 After another 3 gunshots, Euphemia raised her head and looked in the direction of the source of the gunshots. At the same time, Harrow, who was circling around Euphemia, locked onto the enemy and projected his movements to Euphemia. Is this the Emperor's backup plan? Euphemia glanced at the sniper's movements and realized that he had decisively retreated after the 3 gunshots. She couldn't help but shake her head. It seems that the Emperor's methods are indeed extraordinary. After sending out Rollo, the Geas assassin, he still sent a sniper to hide at the side. Thinking of this, Euphemia lowered her head and looked at Harrow, who had faithfully deployed the E-force field to protect her. Fortunately, with Guy's reminder and Harrow's protection, the Emperor's methods didn't succeed. Cha, Your Highness, are you there? At this moment, Layla's voice came from the communication channel. I'm here. Layla, did the enemy change? Euphemia raised her head and looked at the sky. She noticed that nightmare, which was hovering above White Wolf Fortress just now, was only a small shadow left. She asked casually. Yes, Layla responded. Then, she seemed to have thought of something. Did Your Highness encounter an ambush again? Yes. In addition to the assassin hiding in the fortress, there was also a sniper hiding outside the fortress, but that sniper has escaped now. Euphemia raised her hand and placed it on the smooth surface of the silver egg that wrapped the pirate Gouda in it, as she explained what happened just now. From the surface of the almost perfect mirror, the first wave of attacks from the 3rd and 9th Night did not cause any damage to it, let alone the pirate Gouda, who was protected inside. Is that so? Your Highness, it's good that you're fine. I have a plan here that might be able to capture the Knight of the Round Table. Layla proposed a plan as she heaved a sigh of relief. Capture the Knight of the Round Table? How confident are you? If it's only Akeem and the others, it's less than 30%. However, if Your Highness is included, I'm 70% confident. Layla's voice was filled with determination and confidence. Oh, 70%? Seems like you want me to be the bait. Euphemia smiled and gave a straightforward answer. Okay, since you're confident, Layla, let's start. I'm also curious about what Pandora has become. Euphemia pressed her right hand, and the silver egg that protected the pirate Gao suddenly flipped and revealed the pirate Gao Da's true body. In the blink of an eye, It turned into the silver-black cloak worn by the pirate Gao de Hero. Let's go. Hero. Understood. Hero. Understood. In the sky, the Britannia Empire Knight of the Round Table, Third Knight Kino, who had escaped from the anti-air firepower of the White Wolf Fortress, circled in the sky. After observing the battle situation below, he immediately saw the pirate Gao, who flew out of the shield wall of the White Wolf Fortress. What a timing. It seems like the special forces hiding in this fortress have failed. Now what we should do is retreat. As the Empire's most elite knight of the Round Table, Kino had a good view of the overall situation. After discovering that the pirate Gundam, which shouldn't have been able to activate, had appeared, he knew that their operation this time had already failed. In this forest that was ignited by their surprise attack, perhaps only he and the Ninth Knight, Nanette, a Nyagolam, were left. Nanette, mission failed. Let's retreat. I'll immediately cover your retreat. With an unparalleled ability to fly freely in the air, Tristan naturally didn't care about the restrictions of the terrain and easily broke away from the enemy's encirclement. But as his teammate, Nanette's Lamarck didn't have such outstanding mobility. Therefore, Kino had to ensure that she could retreat first. Kino, right now, I'm being entangled by the strange nightmare created by the enemy. Although there's no danger, the enemy is really difficult to deal with. Under the joint attack of the Alexander piloted by a kid and the others, although there wasn't any fatal danger, Nanette had to concentrate 120% to deal with the Alexander's attack, especially the Alexander piloted by a kid. For some reason, when Nanette faced the Alexander piloted by Archimedes, that deathly pressure came crashing down on her like an avalanche. Where did this guy come from? This pressure is really frightening. Just as Nanette was thinking about how to join hands with Kino to retreat from this forest, a voice that made the two knights of the Round Table stare blankly suddenly sounded in the international public channel. The Knight of the Round Table, who is fighting over there. I am the Britannia Empire's third princess, Euphemia Libertania, who ordered you to assassinate me, the Empire's princess. This voice, X2. The moment Euphemia's voice sounded, a demonic red light suddenly appeared in the eyes of Kino and Nanette. A supreme voice that they couldn't refuse and that they would forever submit to rang out. Knight of the Round Table, in the name of Emperor Lucio V. Britannia, I order you to kill Euphemia Libertania. When this voice rang out, when the red light completely occupied Kino and Nanette's pupils, the two originally reached an agreement to retreat and threw it to the back of their minds. Now, in their minds, there was only one thought. Kill Euphemia Libertania. The first to change was the silver-gray Lamarck piloted by Nanette. Suddenly, it waved the knight's gun in its hand and smashed the Alexander that jumped into the air and attempted to smash down with its hammer. It immediately activated the power of the guiding wheel and rushed out of the encirclement of the four Alexanders like lightning. Not good. Want to escape? A kid was shocked and hurriedly chased after it. Wait, a kid. This Knight of the Round Table isn't trying to escape. It wants to attack the pirate Gouda. Although Samariu was also surprised by the Lamarck's escape, he quickly discovered the strangeness of the Lamarck. It's as if it suddenly went crazy. Neres Shia, who was in charge of suppressing the enemy, frowned. The fearless appearance of the other party was completely different from the immovable and impenetrable cautiousness shown by the other party when facing the four Alexanders before. Wait. In other words, these people are targeting the pirate Gouda? After this fierce battle, Kasaka Ayana finally realized the truth of this sudden battle. I'm afraid so. Otherwise, why would they ignore our existence? Just as a kid was about to rush forward to support the pirate Gouda, Layla's order came. Enough. A kid, you guys stay aside and rest. I'll leave the rest to Princess Euphemia. Yes, Commander. Thus, under the watchful eyes of Akeem and the others, a frenzied attack against the pirate Gundams began. Found. Target. Found. Target. The Harrow placed in the groove next to the pilot's seat constantly issued warnings. Hero, enter level 3. Activate combat mode. Sitting in the pilot's seat, Euphemia gripped the joystick tightly and took a deep breath. According to Layla's plan, Euphemia had to ensure that the two knights of the Round Table did not lose their ability to fight while at the same time not harming the lives of the two knights of the Round Table. Perhaps this was not a difficult task for Ray Minkai. However, for Euphemia, who piloted the pirate Gouda and had less than 3 actual combat experience, it was a difficult task. Hero, begin. Euphemia's eyes burst with fighting spirit as she shouted. Attack! Begin! Attack! Begin! In the midst of Hero's yell, the pirate Gouda took a step and rushed out dozens of meters away. His hand released a dazzling brilliance. That's the new weapon mentioned in the report. Nanette, be careful. Although the will to retreat was erased by the Emperor's geas, the two knights of the Round Table's fighting spirit and instinct still existed. The moment they saw the brilliance released from the pirate Gouda's hand, they immediately recalled some top-secret documents mentioned in the report. Among them, the beam chopper in the pirate Gouda's hand was the most important. Understood. Kino, watch out for support. Those annoying white nightmare don't seem to be chasing after us. So, let me test the power of this new model. Following Nanette's shout, Lamarck, who was holding a knight's lance, charged towards the pirate Gundam like lightning. It seemed that he wanted to give the pirate Gouda a heavy blow with a high-speed stab. However, this was the most common attack pattern among the Britannia Empire's nightmare pilots. However, it was blocked by the pirate Gouda's seemingly light, but actually unbreakable cloak. What? In front of Nanette's eyes was the night lance that couldn't pierce through the cloak. The beam chopper that had been charging for a long time slashed horizontally and cut Lammerlock into two. Immediately after, the pirate Gouda raised his left hand. As the silver-black cloak fluttered, a barb appeared on its surface, sweeping away Lammerlock's hands and head. All that was left was the cockpit that was completely blocked by Lammerlock's already broken body. Nanette, who was sitting in the cockpit, also fainted from this violent attack. How can this be? In just one round, Lammerlock and Nanette were defeated? Her Royal Highness Euphemia. When did she become so strong? Kino, who was piloting Tristan and circling in the air, looked in shock at the pirate Gouda, who split Lammerlock into wreckage with just a wave of his hand. Euphemia, the third princess of the Empire who was regarded as a flower vase by many of the Empire's upper echelons. When did she become such a powerful knight? However, this wasn't the time to be shocked. Kino knew that now that Nanette was defeated, he would become the pirate Gouda's target. However, just as he was thinking of retreating, the geas that was deeply engraved in his soul by the Emperor flared up again, making him unable to do so. He even thought of retreating once again. Retreat, retreat. No, can't retreat. Retreat, no, can't. Retreat. Her Royal Highness Euphemia must be killed. Now, there was only death in front of him. Long live the Britannia Empire. Long live the Emperor Lucio V. Britannia. The moment Kino's will was completely shattered by the GSS, the Tristan he was piloting dove down towards the pirate Gouda like a meteor. He looked like he was going to perish together with the pirate. That resolute look made even a kid and the others who were watching from the side unable to sit still. They immediately activated their Alexander and sped up towards the pirate Gouda. At the same time, they raised the machine guns in their hands and continuously fired bullet after bullet at the rapidly falling Tristan. However, as Tristan's falling speed increased, the Alexander's shooting seemed to be unable to catch up with its figure. Moreover, the pirate Gouda who was standing in the same place didn't adopt a dodging posture. On the contrary, he looked like he was going to fight. Hero, can you ensure the safety of the pilot? Euphemia asked softly as she watched Tristan fall like a meteor. Confirm. Safe. Confirm. Safe. That's good. Let's begin. Euphemia stomped her feet, and the X-shaped thruster on the pirate Gouda's back suddenly burst into a dazzling flame as he rushed towards Tristan. Therefore, in the horrified eyes of a kid and the others, the pirate Gao Da's cloak suddenly boiled and peeled off from the pirate Gao Da's body. It quickly gathered in front of the pirate Gao Da and unfolded into a large silver gray net that looked like a big mouth. Boom! It was slow at first, but it was fast at the same time. The moment the big net unfolded, the rapidly falling Tristan rushed into the big net. The momentum was so great that it even pushed the pirate Gouda, who was in mid-air, back to the ground again. 2 deep marks were drawn in the mud. Success? Success? The battle situation changed so quickly that a kid and the others who were watching from the side couldn't react in time. Tristan, who looked like he was going to perish together with the pirate, was subdued by the pirate Gouda with a big net. A kid and the others looked at Tristan, who was firmly bound by the silver gray net, and the same sentence appeared in their minds at the same time. The Knight of the Round Table is nothing more than this. Chapter 214. In the forest near White Wolf Fort, there were armed soldiers and ferocious-looking hounds. Under their carpet search, there were not many things that could be hidden in the forest near White Wolf Fort. It just so happened that the only sniper who saw the situation was not good and took the lead to escape was also found in this forest. However, these traces were no longer of much significance to Lei Mingkai. After learning that the White Wolf Fort had been attacked as expected, Lei Mingkai directly shook off the helicopters that were hovering above the twin-fanged Lion Zero. He gave the Langlon West Country, who still showed a lazy attitude even when the core area was attacked, a lesson. It seems that our knight is very concerned about His Royal Highness. Jean, who received the news from Layla for the first time, looked at the long-toothed Lion Zero that crossed half of Langlon Shi's border in a short period of time and couldn't help but smile. At this moment, whether it was the long-toothed Lion Zero or the pirate Gao Da's performance, it was enough to prove the value of the cooperation between Lei Mingkai and Euphemia. Especially when Lei Mingkai rescued Cornelia, he also destroyed 2 of the 4 knight regiments that had been suppressing Langlon Shi. At the same time, Euphemia, who was staying in White Wolf Fort, was assassinated and captured by the 2 Round Table Knights. Although these were not Jean's own merits, but inside Langlon Shi, the person who insisted on forming an alliance with Lei Mingkai, Euphemia, and even the Black Knight Regiment was Jean, and only he, General Jean, could complete this alliance with his own strength. It's been a long time, Your Royal Highness Cornelia. Looking at Cornelia, who walked down from the cockpit of the long-toothed Lion Zero, Jean, who was a little excited by the good news, stepped forward and took the initiative to show his goodwill. Zeon Smyrith? I remember the last time we met was on the Western Front battlefield of Langlon Shi. I didn't expect that I would become a prisoner in such a short time. Cornelia, who had been declared a traitor by the empire she was loyal to, couldn't help but sigh when she saw how the general she had suppressed was still so powerful. No, Her Highness Cornelia's reputation still existed. I believe that as long as this powerful knight is here, I believe that Your Highness Cornelia's banner will still fly on the battlefield. Cornelia naturally knew what Jean was trying to do with his goodwill. Hence, she nodded her head lightly. Thank you for your kind words. Now, I need to leave for a while. Cornelia had just finished speaking when she no longer paid any attention to Jean. Instead, she turned around and left on her own, heading towards the white figure that had been standing below the entrance of White Wolf Fort since the beginning and was waiting for her return. Euphemia, my little sister, I didn't expect to see you again. The reunion of sisters was naturally heartwarming and moving. But on the other side, beside the long-fanged lion, there was a smell of gunpowder between Lei Mingkai and Jean. General, what's going on with the attack this time? Lei Mingkai, who had walked down from the long-fanged lion, opened his mouth and bluntly went straight to the point. To tell you the truth, we had already predicted that there would be an attack on White Wolf Fort and made arrangements for it. However, your side's approach is indeed puzzling. Why was the infiltration of the Britannia Empire's most powerful force, the Knight of the Round Table, not discovered? Furthermore, 2 of them sneaked in at once. Lei Mingkai's gaze went past Jean, and landed on Zero's face as she walked past him. Then, he turned his head back to look at Jean. In this way, your country's security forces and intelligence network are really worrying. Jean opened his mouth. His heart that was excited because of the heavy losses of the 2 major knight regiments and the capture of the 2 Knight of the Round Table gradually cooled down. I'm sorry. This is our negligence. I don't deny this point. Moreover, I will use this as a warning and reselect a new batch of elite troops to be responsible for protecting White Wolf Fort to make up for this mistake. However, Jean's promise attracted another person's denial. It's not enough. General, you and I both know that there are many thieves in the capital who have an inexplicable relationship with the Britannia Empire among the drunkards who live in a drunken stupor. In this kind of situation, is it enough to surround White Wolf Fort just by increasing the number of troops? Zero's question was sharp, so sharp that Jean couldn't avoid it. Jean took a deep breath and raised his hand to signal the surrounding soldiers to retreat. Then, he stretched out his right hand and made an inviting gesture. It's a long story. Why don't I take this opportunity to be frank with Your Excellency Knight and Your Excellency Zero? I couldn't ask for more. Zero lifted her cloak and took the lead to walk over. Lei Mingkai raised his hand and gestured, and the long-fanged lion behind him changed from a huge and mighty beast to a white cat in a flash of light. Then, State Zero of the White Cat jumped and landed on Rei Mingkai's shoulder. This is truly breathtaking. It was Jean's first time witnessing the whole process of State Zero of the long-fanged lion turning into State Zero of the White Cat. This was simply a phenomenon that violated the rules of the world that Jean was familiar with. Jean, who always had a calm mind, couldn't say the words that fit the scene in front of him. Are you surprised? Humans. This is just a small part of my strength. State Zero of the White Cat sitting on Rei Mingkai's shoulder shocked Jean once again. It spoke? This beast-shaped body has self-awareness? General Jean, this is State Zero, and it's also my partner. If you are still amazed by State Zero's power, I'm afraid Zero will be impatient. In fact, Zero didn't show any signs of impatience like Lei Mingkai said. On the contrary, the expression under the mask was particularly playful. Is this the source of Rei Mingkai's power? Interesting. This power might really be able to pull the Emperor down from the throne. Sorry to keep you waiting. Although I don't know how much you will believe in what I'm about to say, I can guarantee with my character that this is the current predicament and reality of Langlon West Country. Jean looked around, and after confirming that the surroundings had been cleared by his confidants, he began to talk about his experiences and predicaments in the 40-people council. I won't go into detail about the bitterness and the schemes that surrounded Jean. An hour later, Jean, who had ended the secret conversation, left with a satisfied smile. Zero sighed inwardly as she watched the convoy swiftly leaving White Wolf Fort under the escort of numerous helicopters. I didn't expect you to agree to General Jean's request so easily. Aren't you afraid that your princess will object to lending the 2 Knights of the Round Table to General Jean? I'm afraid, but I'm confident. Although I haven't asked Euphemia about the details of the process, from the battle record that Layla sent over earlier, I can see that the 2 Knights of the Round Table have been GASS. Lei Mingkai glanced at Zero and said slowly, "You're right. It's the power that you lost." Gius? As expected of me. In the case of uncertainties, they would use the method that was most likely to guarantee victory. However, he is missing the most important factor. Pirate Gauda. Rei Mingkai glanced at the pirate Gauda, who was wrapped in the silver egg again. No, maybe this body is one of the factors, but in my opinion, being able to heal Euphemia, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death, rescue Cornelia, and even the appearance of Department Q and other things that shouldn't have happened were all because of your existence. Me? Rei Mingkai raised his eyebrows, but didn't say anything else. Because what Zero said was right. When Rei Mingkai's memory began to recover and the White Cat State Zero appeared beside him, the timeline of this world began to change. Of course, Rei Mingkai wasn't the only factor that changed. Compared to me, you should pay more attention to the man sitting on the throne on the other side of the ocean. Compared to him, I'm just a harmless factor. Harmless? Ha ha ha. Hearing Raymond Kai's self-praising words, Zero couldn't help but laugh. What a harmless! I believe that when the two leaders of Saint Raphael and Saint Michael Knight Corps hear your words, their expressions will be very interesting. Zero's words were full of ridicule and sarcasm. Maybe. Ray Minkai spread his hands and changed the topic. After lending the two knights of the Round Table to General Xian, it means that we will have to face the Emperor in full force. Are you confident? Confidence? Zero muttered to himself before laughing out loud. No, because all of my confidence, all of my strategies, tactics, strategies, everything that I can think of and do, he knows. Although I don't want to admit it, he is me and I am him. This is an irrefutable fact. So, see walk step? Ray Minkai wasn't surprised. Zero's current state was almost exactly the same as the inner demon mentioned in the fantasy novels in his previous life. Now, what Zero could do was to defeat the Emperor who took everything from him and defeat this inner demon. Yes, see walk step. From now on, I and the Black Knight Corps will listen to you, the Britannia Empire's Third Knight Protector, His Excellency Ray Minkai's command. Only in this way can I see a glimmer of hope in defeating him under the enormous pressure he gives me. Zero's decision surprised Ray Minkai. He never thought that Zero would make such a choice, putting himself and the Black Knight Corps under Ray Minkai's command. Even if this was temporary, Ray Minkai knew that the moment Zero saw a glimmer of hope in defeating the Emperor, he would regain control of the Black Knight Corps and give the Emperor a fatal blow. Ray Minkai couldn't see Zero's face under the mask, but he could tell that Zero's tone was resolute. Hearing you say this, I feel that the next battle may be the final battle. Ray Minkai smiled and took the initiative to extend his right hand. Isn't that even better? No matter what, as long as the enemy is willing to move, then his weakness will appear. I, Zero, and the Black Knight Corps are all in your hands. No, Captain Ray Minkai. Thank you for your advice. Staff Officer Zero. In this seemingly impromptu conversation, many important decisions that would determine the direction of the future were born. UFFI. I didn't expect you to really come back. Knight. After dealing with all sorts of trivial matters, Euphemia and Cornelia finally had the time to sit at the side of the lake beside White Wolf Fort, and they had a hearty chat in the pavilion. Yes, now that I think about it, this experience is simply like a fairy tale. Euphemia picked up the teapot and poured a cup of hot and fragrant black tea for Cornelia and said with a light smile. Cornelia stretched out her finger and slowly moved it on the cup's handle. Her expression was a little confused and yearning, but more than that, there was loneliness. Yes, Euphemia, who had always been under her wings and protected well, had seen many more vast and mysterious worlds than this world when she wasn't aware of it. Moreover, in this kind of situation, not only was Euphemia not confused by the mysterious and vast world outside, she instead resolutely chose a path that Cornelia didn't even want to think about. That's the mess that you obtain in that world. Cornelia looked at the silver egg that stood at the side of White Wolf Fort. Yes, its name is Pirate Gouda. It was made by me and Kai together, although the Pirate Gouda at that time was only a model. Euphemia smiled a little bashfully and then took out her personal terminal. Like a person who didn't forget to show off to the person closest to her when she got something good, she began to play some videos that she and Ray Minkai took in Star Glory City, in the Steel Polo world for Cornelia. Looking at the Macross fleet that she had seen in the sky above Kyushu Island sailing out of Star Glory City with imposing fleets, Cornelia once again realized how insignificant her existence was. Even the Britannia Empire that she had always been proud of was so vulnerable in front of such a fleet. UFFI, you said that you're already an inspector of Star Glory City? Cornelia raised her doubts after thinking about it. No, I'm an inspector of the SFP administration. Star Glory City is the headquarters of the SFP Pth administration in a certain universe. Euphemia corrected Cornelia's opinion. The S, F, P administration, is it? That Mimi had once said the same thing. But, according to your current authority, are you able to mobilize such a fleet to fight? Cornelia's gaze finally fell on the warships that were constantly warping under the leadership of Macross. Our authority isn't enough. However, we can apply for fleet support under certain special circumstances. Euphemia shook her head and put up a finger, indicating that it was forbidden. But what exactly are the so-called special circumstances? We have a confidentiality agreement. Before it happens, we can't leak the details. I'm very sorry, Sister Royal. UFFIU. Cornelia was stunned, then let out a sigh of relief. All right, UFFI. It's fine as long as you're back. Chapter 215. Your Majesty, Your Majesty, this is not good. The Emperor, who had just left the throne, was stopped by the servant who rushed in a panic. What's wrong? Why are you so flustered? The Emperor glanced at the flustered servant. Looking at him, it was as if the sky had fallen. I'm very sorry. I've disturbed your Majesty's mood. It's just that a piece of news came back from Europe, and I had to act so recklessly. Europe? The Emperor's eyes moved slightly, and then he sat back on the throne and said calmly, Speak. What kind of news can make you so flustered? Yes. The servant kneeling on the ground dared not lift his head, and cold sweat gradually covered his entire forehead. Your Majesty, the 4 knight regiments guarding Europe have suffered a crushing defeat. 2 of the 4 knight regiments have been lost. Now the forces of Europe have been surpassed by the alliance led by Langlon Shi, and they have occupied an advantageous position. Oh, the 4 knight regiments have suffered such heavy losses? It seems that the beast does have some tricks up its sleeve. The Emperor was not surprised by this news. From the beginning, after he formulated the strategy of luring the enemy with Cornelia as the focus, he had estimated that the losses would be heavy. And the current news was far from the extent of the loss that the Emperor himself had made. 2 of the 4 knight regiments have been lost. Well, it's not too stupid to be in charge of Europe. After the Emperor estimated in his heart, he smiled and looked at the servant. So, is there any other news? Yes. The attendant nodded, but he looked like he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Why? Is it a news that you can't accept? The Emperor raised his eyebrows, looked at the servant, and smiled softly. Since you don't want to say it, then let me guess. The 3rd knight and the 9th knight have suffered a defeat? Yes. Your Majesty is wise. The servant did not expect the Emperor to say the news he wanted to say, and quickly responded. Say it. The 3rd knight and the 9th knight sneaked into Langlon West Country according to the plan with the help of an insider and successfully reached the target location. Although the initial attack was very effective, forcing out the target's trump card, from then on, the situation of the battle had undergone an unbelievable change. First, she successfully infiltrated White Wolf Fort's special forces and lost contact with all of them. Then, the target, Euphemia, openly walked out of White Wolf Fort and even used an inconceivable method to cause the snipers we arranged outside to miss repeatedly. Unbelievable method? The Emperor's gaze changed. He seemed to be interested in this. Do you have any information? No. Due to the urgency of the situation, after the sniper realized that his attack was ineffective, he immediately sent a message to the 3rd knight and the 9th knight to retreat. So, the 3rd knight and the 9th knight have safely returned to the territory of the Britannia Empire. The Emperor asked slowly. No, for some reason, after the sniper sent the message, the 3rd knight and the 9th knight did make the decision to retreat, but after Euphemia Britannia took the initiative to announce her existence, they suddenly changed their minds and madly attacked a mysterious airframe. As a result, they were captured one by one. Captured? Is that so? It seems that the enemy wants to embarrass the Britannia Empire. As the most powerful knight of the Round Table in the Empire, they were captured by the enemy without being able to fight back. I believe that many people want to see this kind of joke. After that, the emperor stood up, no longer paying attention to the sweaty servant, and turned to leave the throne. Under the palace, there was a spacious space that was deliberately developed. Fluorescent lamps were installed in an orderly manner at the top of this spacious space, lighting up the entire space with their own light. They also illuminated the rows of orderly arranged energy tanks that stood on the ground about 1 meter high and 1.5 meters wide. Below these energy tanks, there were fist-sized energy pipelines wrapped in insulating materials. These energy pipelines extended from the sockets below the energy tanks and were deliberately arranged in a certain arrangement, extending all the way to the depths of this spacious space. Hum, hum, hum. At this time, a slight buzzing sound came from the depths of this space, reverberating back and forth above the energy tanks. Kacha, hum. Suddenly, with a burst of noise, the energy pipelines that extracted energy from the energy tanks suddenly burst into small sparks. In the midst of these jumping sparks, a sigh came from the depths of this space. Failed again. Doctor, you don't have to be discouraged. Didn't you say before that no matter how many times you fail, as long as you succeed once, it is enough? In the shadow, a graceful figure walked out. She was looking at the man who was standing in front of the equipment with some regret and comforted him gently. Yes. The man nodded, then raised his hand and scratched his somewhat messy hair. But, Phyllis, if this drags on, I'm afraid that Charles's idea will come true. At that time, whether it is our idea or the idea of the emperor, it will all be for naught. That's impossible, Doctor. At this time, a voice that could not be denied sounded. The two were startled and looked back at the same time, only to find that it was the emperor who rarely came to this underground facility. Your Majesty, what wind blew you here today? The man, Dr. Sisali, smiled bitterly a few times. I made a fool of myself in this state. No, Doctor, I'll leave everything here to you. You've worked hard for this. I won't blame you for it. The emperor turned back and looked at the ruins that were secretly transported to this underground space. Doctor, how much more time do we need to decipher the password here? About a week more. Although this is a part of the ruins, it's not the main body of the door. If I have the help of the key of this world, my deciphering speed will increase a lot. Sisali said with some difficulty. Although in addition to his own work, he was involved in other fields, but for now, the conditions in front of him could not be compared to his real laboratory. Is that so? What a pity. The key of this world won't help us. The emperor shook his head and said in a seemingly admiring tone, no matter which world it is, the key will always be loyal to only one person. Although there is no difference between us, the key will always be able to tell the difference between us. Is this the so-called fate? Forget it. In that case, I'll work harder. Your Majesty. No, Doctor, I'm here today, other than to see your progress. There's another thing I need your help with. The emperor stopped the doctor who was about to start the experiment again. Oh, Your Majesty, please speak. Although Sisali was a little surprised, since they were allies, he nodded. I need your help. The Knight of the Round Table failed and was captured. The emperor did not hide the failure of his side and directly told the truth. Oh, the Knight of the Round Table failed? That's rare. Let me guess. I'm afraid they met the lion? Although Sisali had not left this underground space much, he still said the truth. Yes, 2 of the 4 knight regiments in Europe have been defeated, and 2 Knights of the Round Table have been captured. I believe that soon, the world will announce the capture of the Knight of the Round Table. Oh? Ha! Do you want me to rescue them? Sisali thought for a moment and smiled slightly. Yes, as long as you rescue them, then they will be at your disposal. The emperor's words were shocking. He actually promised to let the 2 Knight of the Round Table be at Sisali's disposal. Is that so? Your Majesty, don't go back on your word. I've long wanted to see what kind of warrior the world's strongest pilot can cultivate. Sisali was surprised and said with surprise, well, a promise is a promise. This is a promise made by the emperor himself. No one can go back on their word. Okay, if that's the case, Phillies, you should go to Europe. Well, bring reagent number 3, reagent number 5, and reagent number 4. Cicely pondered for a moment and asked Phyllis, who had been silent, to prepare the things for Europe. Your Majesty, is there anything else? Facing Cicely, who showed a respectful look, the Emperor glanced at the ruins that were linked by many probes and shook his head slightly. That's it for today. Doctor, the next step is up to you. Yes, Your Majesty. On the other side. As the lamp was turned on, a table placed in the middle of the interrogation room was illuminated from the darkness. On the other side of the faint light, 2 figures sat. Ray Minkai, Cornelia. After deciding to temporarily lend the 2 knights of the Round Table to Xion, Cornelia suddenly proposed to interrogate the 2 knights of the Round Table. Perhaps Cornelia wanted to know about Pandoragon, or perhaps Cornelia wanted to know why she was labeled as a traitor by the royal family. Therefore, as her senior in the officer school, the 9th Knight of the Britannia Empire, Nanette Anigalam, was brought to this room. Your Highness Cornelia, under the escort of the soldiers, the 9th Knight, whose hands were tightly tied, was pressed on the chair opposite Ray Minkai and Cornelia. Looking at the shocked Nanette, Cornelia couldn't help but sigh secretly. Long time no see, Minister Anigalam. When Nanette heard Cornelia calling her by her official name, she knew that Cornelia didn't want to use their friendship in the officer school to threaten her. Long time no see, Your Highness. It seems that the situation between me and Your Highness has reversed. Nanette revealed a bitter smile. Nanette, relax. No one will hurt you here. I want to know some things, and I hope you can answer truthfully. Cornelia's attitude was very sincere, without the slightest trace of a victor bullying a loser. Although Cornelia was asking for Nanette's opinion, Nanette knew what Cornelia wanted to ask the moment Cornelia opened her mouth. Your Highness, you want to ask why the Empire labeled you as a traitor overnight, right? Yes, that's what I want to know. Even though I already know that the 98th Emperor Charles abdicated to the 99th Emperor, I'm still puzzled as to why I was labeled as a traitor. Cornelia nodded and voiced the doubts that had been lingering in her mind. So it's like this? Your Highness, first, I want to clarify a fact. The 98th Emperor of the Britannia Empire, Charles di Britannia, didn't abdicate to the 99th Emperor, but before that, His Majesty had already disappeared. His Majesty, sitting on the throne now, is the new emperor elected by all the nobles. When this shocking news came out, Cornelia and Ray Minkai were shocked. But unlike the shocked Cornelia, Ray Minkai was already prepared for Charles's disappearance. However, this was far from the time when Charles would use the sword of judgment. Why? How could Charles disappear so early? Moreover, the emperor who took Zero's Geas might have already made his move on World C. All the nobles? Then, among the Knight of the Round Table, how many people support the new emperor? Cornelia pondered for a moment before asking a crucial question. What Euphemia was about to do next would undoubtedly put her under pressure from the entire empire. Under these circumstances, Cornelia would naturally do everything she could to weaken the enemy's strength. Other than the first knight who ignored the new emperor's orders, the rest of the Knight of the Round Table faced the new emperor with the intention of listening to him and not listening to him. Nanette revealed a bitter smile. As the strongest knight of the empire, the Knight of the Round Table actually had such a day. This made Nanette, who was one of the members, feel that it was laughable. But why did you and the third knight participate in this mission? Moreover, during the battle, you looked like you wouldn't rest until you died. At this moment, Ray Minkai, who had been listening by the side, asked the crucial question. Nanette paused and then shook his head blankly. I don't know. What I remember is that when we met the new emperor the third night, and I did indeed accept the mission. But from the start, we didn't want to get involved in the struggle between the royal families. But Nanette's brows furrowed deeply, a trace of pain appearing on his face. But when the infiltration team was completely wiped out and we decided to retreat, the moment a familiar voice sounded, I lost consciousness. Only when I woke up did I discover that I had been captured by Your Highness. Voice. Ray Minkai raised his hand and pressed on the table. The wall on one side of the interrogation room suddenly became transparent with a whoosh, clearly imprinting the figure standing behind it into Nunit's eyes. UFFI, Your Highness Euphemia. Suddenly, Nanette, whose hands were tied, jumped up from the stool and charged towards the glass wall like a madman. He was like a wild beast that had fallen into madness as he rammed into the glass wall. Kill! Kill! Kill Euphemia! Nunit's eyes glowed red, his expression sinister. He no longer had the composure he had when he was talking to Cornelia. What was left was a crazed desire to kill Euphemia. Nunit, stop! While Cornelia was crying out in alarm, Ray Minkai, who had long been prepared, took a big stride forward and chopped at Nunit's neck. Euphemia, Nunit, who had sunk into madness, finally fell to the ground. Kai, this is Gius? Looking at the unconscious Nunit, Cornelia thought of a phrase that Ray Minkai mentioned. Yes, Gius, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.